let's help transition a person's mind into thinking, okay, you know, this GTO approach that I have is like the perfect way to play, where that couldn't be really farther from the truth, in my opinion. I mean, the more information and the more understanding that you have inside the game of all the different mechanics inside of it adds so much to like that infinite spider web that the game is of poker, especially more when you talk about tournaments as opposed to like 100 big blind cash over and over, where you see all of these different intricate scenarios with different players at different stages of the tournament. And depending on even how they feel that day is going to determine how they play this hand. So if you're just looking at, you know, the sheet in front of you, you're missing a lot of the picture.
Yeah, you know, I like, and I heard you talk a lot in. Actually, we haven't really started the pod yet, but I get excited because I heard you talk a lot about stuff like, I feel like the energy at the tables, the flow of the game, maneuvering around the situations, and actually, there's a lot of alignment in philosophy. Have you ever read the book Art of War? Or
Yeah.
heard about the book?
Yeah.
And like, there's one philosophy in there from Sun Tzu, which I strongly relate with, and which is a big philosophy in my poker game. And I think you would agree. It's like the avoid what is strong and strike what's weak. You try to figure out, okay, when are people weak? That's when you strike. And you try to figure out when people are strong. That's when you try to avoid. And that's really kind of what I got from hearing you talk about poker. It's like, yeah, you just try to pick up on as much information as possible, which give you a more accurate idea about his range. And then you can just look at your hand. Well, how does my hand does against his range? Well, I think he's pretty strong. Well, I think he's pretty weak. So let's follow it up accordingly, right?
And then, like, you know, let's, you know, go through the stage of GTO. Everyone's so studied at pre-flop poker, so they're masters of pre-flop poker. But now bring them like deep in the spider web on these turn and river spots that, you know, they couldn't have done enough study to really be sharp in this situation. So it's like, yeah, of course, you know, I know that you guys have it down of defending ranges in the big blind and how to play these pre-flop 3-betting spots, but when you wind up in these strange ones that you couldn't really have gotten that far in like studying chart, I think, because I see poker is such like a infinite game with that you have to take every bit of information that you have.
Yeah, I mean, you're clearly a puzzle solver, right? You try to get yourself into a situation and you solve the puzzle. Whereas the new school poker players may be a bit more studied in terms of charts and less good at solving the puzzle that's presented to them. Weird situations, like what the hell is going on? I don't know. I haven't seen this solution yet. So
Yeah,
what do I
yeah,
do
and
now?
they take away like their power of creativity from themselves, because now they just base every play that they make. Oh, okay, you know, I'm gonna go check it up after the tournament. Oh, okay, solver says it's right. Okay, all
Move
done. I
on.
don't actually use my brain at all and solve any problems. Then it just turns into a memorization game, and then you wind up, yeah, deep in the spider web with some tough spiders, and they're gonna eat you alive.
I love the spider web. The spider web, we need to get back. All right, let me introduce you in the pod and let's start the pod
Perfect.
before we ramble. I'm sure we're gonna talk
Before
about
we
a lot of
talk for
good
the
topics
next
like
2
this.
hours without it recording.
What's up, my fellow poker enthusiasts? It's Rene, aka the Wacko here, and together with my co-host Adam Carmichael, we represent to you the Mechanics of Poker podcast. In this podcast, we deconstruct high-stakes poker players, figuring out what it is about them, how they think, what they do that makes them so successful, with an extra focus on the obstacles they faced and the skills they had to develop to surpass them. Over the years, me and Adam have gained a lot of experience in both reaching high-stakes poker ourselves and teaching other players to do the same. We have bundled all this knowledge together in our coaching program, The Mechanics of Poker, which is the most complete poker coaching product on the market. If you want to have a chance to work with me and Adam so you can get unstuck and make more progress in your poker career, go over to mechanicsofpoker.com to apply. But without further ado, let's learn from another high-stakes player's journey in today's episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the Mechanics of Poker podcast. Before we dive into another great episode, I wanted to put out a quick announcement that our Mechanics of Poker 2.0 coaching program is open for enrollment up until the end of this weekend. This is your last chance to enroll in the Mechanics of Poker 2.0 before we will close the program permanently. To make sure you take action and you don't miss out, we've put it together the best promotion ever. There's 25% off on the program and 3 bonuses worth close up to 3,000 euro in free value. So go over to mechanicsofpoker.com or click the link in the description below to work with me and Adam and make 2024 your best poker year ever. Introducing today's guests, we will be chatting with the current #1 all-time money list holder, Bryn Kenney. What drew me personally to invite Bryn on the pod is both his polarizing character. Some might hate him, some might love him. I'm personally more in the love camp myself. His tolerance to risk, constantly putting big chunks of his net worth on the line, and the confidence he has in himself regardless of his results. I'm also very curious about his development throughout poker, starting out as a gamer, but later start to see poker as a great vehicle to learn more about yourself and about life. He's also mentioned that we are all students of life, and he's very passionate about learning and developing himself in our areas, be it technically, socially, physically, or spiritually. This personal growth has allowed him to be more present in the moment while playing poker, so he can better listen to his instincts, feel the flow of the game, maneuver around the poker tables, and make great decisions. As always, I'm joined with my co-host, co-mechanics of poker coach, Mr. Mindset and Performance, Adam Carmichael. Adam, Bryn comes across as a very intuitive player who follows his gut. When we mention topics like intuition, gut feeling, there's usually a bit of vague topics. Could you maybe clarify for the audience what a gut feeling actually is and how it can both help but also hinder the quality of your poker decisions?
I would class a gut feeling as a access to knowledge which isn't in your kind of conscious reasoning, conscious thinking, and this is often off millions of data points. If you think someone like Bryn's probably played millions and millions of poker hands, he's built a strong intuitive feeling of how spots feel. So for example, often you can say an opponent feels strong in this spot or he feels weak. It's not like I've consciously thought through his range. It's like the sample size I have intuitively is telling me he's either strong or he's weak here. Now where that can go wrong is we have something called biases which lead us into certain directions where our emotions, let's say we're risk averse and we have an intuitive feeling to fold, but that might be coming from a fear or an insecurity where you don't want to put chips in. So we've got to navigate this space of how do we listen to our intuition? How do we develop a strong intuitive feeling spot? How do we still use our logic to make good decisions? And then when does that take us astray? So yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation with Bryn. We can go deeper into how he uses his own intuition to make decisions, and I'm very interested in extracting as much knowledge as we can from him.
Yeah, me too. This guy has a lot of knowledge. Really, really excited to start chatting. But before we start, I would like to give a big shout out to our sponsor, GTO Wizard.
We are proud to announce a technological breakthrough. Introducing GTO Wizard AI. This powerful technology can solve any custom poker spot in seconds to high accuracy. Unlike pre-solved solutions, this allows you to edit the solving parameters. That means you can modify the ranges, change the stack and pot sizes, customize the betting tree, and automatically simplify and optimize your bet sizes. Brace yourself. The meta is about to change.
So sign up to GTO Wizard using the link below, gtowizard.com/mechanics. Get 10% off on your first subscription and join the weekly webinars, of which one every month is with me. Looking really forward on coaching you guys there. But without further ado, let's get into goodness of today's episode. All right, Bryn, great to have you on the pod, man. You have recently reclaimed the #1 spot I saw on the all-time money list. Congratulations. You took down the 250K for 6.8 million. Not a bad score. I was wondering, is being #1, which you are right now, is that something that you have always strived towards ever since you got into poker? And if so, what drives you and what gives you the confidence to set a goal? Because I can imagine a lot of people just start to play out poker and see, well, you know, let's see how far I can take it. And their confidence rises when their results rise. But you straight away said, listen, I'm going to be #1. How does that work?
I guess it's hard. Where does that come from? Because I just had this, I guess, innate confidence in myself. I think I would say that it has to start from like your upbringing as a child, the amount of like love and support that you get. So I would shoot it all back from like really the beginning where I feel like I had an amazing family, amazing parents who gave me tons of love. And enabled my creativity. I think that a lot of people kind of get their creativity stolen from them at different stages in their life, either if it's their parents, the system of school, the system of the world and what it expects from you. You're supposed to maybe fit into like a certain mold, where I feel like it was instilled into me, like to be my own person and to believe in that. And I think that there's no way you can really have confidence in yourself like that unless if you're really in touch with yourself. So I think that I don't know, it was just like a match made in heaven, I guess, me and poker from the beginning. Is like, as soon as I started playing poker, I really loved the aspects of testing yourself, always like being in continuous growth and trying to be a better and better version of yourself while competing against other people who are trying to do the same and see themselves as the top. It made it really fun for me. So I think that's another part of it. Like, you really need to have fun. I might be shooting it a little early, but like I have friends that said right when I really got into poker at 17 years old that I was saying to them that I was going to be #1 in the world. And to imagine where that comes from, you know, now being such like a different version of myself than the 17-year-old version, you know, this version would have to say on one side that a bit of a lunatic, no matter what, like a bit of a different screw, I guess, than others, but then also just like a belief that I could make something that I see that maybe others would convince themselves that it's not possible. You know, let's say you imagine that thought, and we all have so many different thoughts. And I feel like a lot of people are prone to not believing in their thought and saying that this is too grandiose of a thing, that, you know, how could, like, there's no way that I could actually accomplish this, because at that point, you know, you see you're at this huge mountain and you're at the bottom. You really just started on the mountain and there are so many people climbing it. And you're saying in your head, you know, I'm going to be the one who reaches the top of the mountain at some point, or not really first, because, you know, there were other people who played, but I guess the reaching the highest point of that mountain, I guess it is, because since the #1 all-time winner is always growing, I guess the mountain also has to like grow. So reaching the highest like level of that mountain, you know, it's very easy to tell yourself that you can't do it, you know, no matter what, if you have like that thought. But I think it's the same to believe that you can. And I don't know, my whole like experience, because before I was playing poker, I was playing Magic the Gathering, and my goal was to be #1 in the world in the 15 and under group, which is when I really played Magic the Gathering. There was a Pro Tour and the JSS, Junior Super Series, they called it, which was 15 and under, and there were 2 different levels. And I was able to reach #1 in the world in that. So I think that was like the preemptive belief that, okay, I already saw something that is this, you know, grand thing to reach. I was able to make it happen. Now this new thought comes into my head that I can reach it on a different mountain. And I just had I believed that thought. And, you know, I would say at the same time though, nothing's given and nothing's easy. You know, you accept, I see life as like infinite possibilities. So it's like when I started to climb this mountain of poker to be the best, I was given a certain type of road of challenges that you would have to accomplish to reach like that top of the mountain. And I think that it was much different than most other people experience in poker, because you see a lot of the winners, they kind of continuously win. So they have this upward trajectory. All the people that you're playing with really in high rollers, they're winning on a yearly basis, and they don't have, you know, necessarily the leaks, because kind of the guys who have leaks in betting sports and other things, they wind up like really washing off at some point, because it's going to be too big of a leak to actually, well, I guess it compounds the difficulty of like the road that you're on. So, you know, my leak was always staking, spending a bit too much money, I don't know if I wouldn't call it a leak. So helping out too many people is definitely not a leak. But if you look at it in terms of like what happened to my bankroll at different stages, it was definitely massively affected by helping a lot of people. But at the same time, I wouldn't call that a leak. That's something that I enjoy doing. And it's
I
like,
guess it's also who you help, right?
yeah, because that, yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Like the beginning, you know, you think you're helping other poker players, taking them and giving them like a path to win. And then you realize that that doesn't really work. And then you then start gearing your help towards people who are actually making an influence with that help, or able to use your resources to positively benefit more people instead of just this one person game. But then at the same time, you know, because it's like, what was like the fire that kept me going. So along this journey from when I started playing poker to reaching number one, I went from millionaire to broke to negative 500K to millionaire to making a bad business deal, negative millionaire, get back in like the green again, build up a million again. So there was none of this like, you know, calm road. It was like a wild and crazy ride of like, you know, can you hang on to the roller coaster? Like when it's flipping you every which way. And the thing for me that I think made it possible for me to even hang on the roller coaster at those stages is because I always equated my success to, enabling more happiness to others, starting with my immediate family in terms of, you know, when I was a kid, my parents had bills, there were all these reasons why I wanted to be successful so that I could help my parents, my grandma, my siblings. So all of my success then equated to, in my mind, happiness for others. And as you're young, you don't necessarily do it in the best way. You're always learning. You know, you might be enabling people at some points where you're trying to help them, but it might not be the best approach. But at the same time, you don't really have the tools in your bag yet to understand what the best approach is. But it's like, because of that, no matter how bad of a spot I was in, like I went from starting the end of one summer with 50K on full tilt. 3 months later, I had 3.5 million on full tilt. 6 months later, I had negative 500K and lost it all. And most of it like was from staking. And then, so I wind up in this spot where I'm negative 500K. And I was playing to get there. I was playing the highest stakes PLO. I just like hopped in PLO and started winning. And once I get to this negative 500 figure, I'm starting to exhaust like the credit I can get from people and the ability really to operate. So I've got to pull it all back and say, okay, well, I might have been playing 500, 1,000 PLO versus Ivy winning 2 months ago, but now I've got to play $20 tournaments and just make 200-300 a day just to dig myself out of this hole. So I feel like too, a lot of times people get into a hole and they think they can get themselves out overnight, where I'm very patient in those situations and I think good at making decisions back against the wall. But it's like that fire of helping my family, helping more than myself. So it's like, I would equate it to like a gladiator in the arena. And, you know, sometimes you might have a leg chopped off. You're going to be in a bad spot. Like sometimes you have to accept that though. And whatever comes out of the other side, you know, all you can do is give it your best. But at the same time, keep giving it your best until your final breath. And yeah, that ability to help people really resonates with me the most. It's what I like the most really about this life experience that we have, is positively affecting people and trying to share the lessons and the skills that you've learned or harnessed during this life.
Yeah, I mean, sounds great, but I mean, that's also a reason why you agreed, I guess, to come on this spot, right? To share your experience. So, I mean, a lot of striving poker players or already professional poker players listening, that probably have, some of them will have the same ambition, but some of them, oh, Kenny is now number one. Well, I'm going to be number one. And Kenny is now here going to explain me how I can have to believe in myself to actually become number one. But it sounded like your upbringing gave you sort of the permission to believe in yourself, right? You mentioned creativity. And then I guess your experience in Magic at a young age kind of gave you that confirmation, like, hey, I got the permission to be confident. And with my skills, I now actually have the right to be confident because I'm actually very good at Magic. You then went on, I think you mentioned you had 50K on full tilt, went to 3.5 million. I assume that didn't happen over there. How did you then switch from Magic to playing poker? And when did you kind of, could you kind of call yourself a professional, and how did that, let's say, first year of your professional career look like? Did that straight away go to this 50K, 3.5 million, and back to
that was like
minus 500K?
that was a few years like into the career, just since we were on like the mindset. I got into that a bit early. But so yeah, like Magic, so I played Magic really until I was 16 and was out of that JSS thing. I probably played some poker like in that time still, but that's when I really, I guess, transitioned my love for games from Magic into poker. And at that time, I was just playing with some friends in high school. We would play a sit and go in my grandpa's backyard and afternoon of some days, and just play between friends. And I wound up playing a bit more like between friends. And at this same time, it was when David Williams made his deep run in the World Series main event, and Dave Williams, being a Magic player, kind of had the Magic players thinking like, oh, wow, you know, this guy just won, I forget what it was, maybe 2 million, 3 million in the early days of, I think it was in 2005. So anyone who played Magic was really like, oh, I must be in the wrong game. And this is the game for like higher stakes. So I got to jump into this one. And then it was just like, as soon as I started playing online, I was really just hooked. At Poker Stars at the time just had decent size. Well, for that time, I was playing $5, $10, $20, $30 tournaments that I would just hop in for. And they kind of had that all day, all throughout the night. So my first year after high school was when I really got into it a lot. And I was in pretty good shape when I graduated high school, but I gained 60 pounds in the first year just playing poker all day, every day, ordering shitty food really all throughout the day. So then my parents were, my mom more was concerned that I should go to college. So I said, okay, you know, I'll go to this community college. Right around the corner from us was one of the best community colleges in the country. So it's like, okay, whatever to satisfy you guys, I'll go sign up over here. But I think it was in the first 2 weeks that I just really had no interest for it, of sitting there through accounting classes and this, that, and the other. It really just didn't pique any of my interest or creativity. And I was already playing a bit of poker, but I hadn't really found any success. And I remember it was during WCOOPs in September, and there was a tournament that I really liked that I had to miss for class. And after that, I just left the class and said, yeah, I'm done. And just started
Priorities, man, priorities.
Yeah, I get that. Well, that like belief, because most people would then convince themselves, no, I'm supposed to go to school. So like kind of
safe route, right?
Continue like something that they really lose all of their creativity, where it's like, and that's why that's one of the reasons why I love poker. I think it can be such a creative expression of yourself, where there are so many different poker styles that you could craft a world-class strategy of, from very tight to very aggressive. And there's somewhere in there that you can craft a masterful strategy in there, which means that the best way that you can play poker is how you feel like playing poker. And there are a lot of people that playing super aggressive wouldn't really work for just their personality. And the same for like the other side of the spectrum. Whereas now, since kind of the approach and at the same time the way that the media portrays it is that this is a solved GTO game where there's a perfect way of playing the game and nothing else, which I would say completely takes anyone's creativity out of it, which now you don't have really any space to make your magic, let's call it, in the way that works for you. You're now following like a book. So for me, that thinking is kind of going back to the same approach of following the path of going to school and getting a job. You're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that. So then taking really the fun out of the game. And if you're not having fun in it, you're never going to be able to be your best either. I think that was
I get that. Especially I can relate to it like in terms of like solver age where it's just like, well, now I'm just following what the solver says and everything kind of does what the solver does. So I just follow the solver as well. And then kind of the creativity gets drawn out of it. And with that, also the fun gets drawn out of it.
Yeah, and now we're in a time where all of the poker programs are talking GTO everything and right play and wrong play, and that you can't win unless if you play this GTO approach. You know, if I was someone on the outside listening to this, it sounds like the least fun game ever. Where like I see poker as like the most fun game ever, where there's so many possibilities to craft like your own style. Now you're trying to sell something to people that has no fun in it. Most of the people that you're watching on there don't look like they're having fun either. They're not saying anything, doing anything. And, you know, I'm not someone that's, you don't have to talk to people, you know, in hands and do X and Y. But, you know, for me, it was always like if someone, you're in a high roller scene, so you see a lot of the same people every day. And, you know, if someone new comes to the scene, usually they're a recreational person. If a lot of people don't know them, they're a recreational player. And you know, they're there to have fun. Poker needs to be fun to be able to attract those type of people to actually want to play. So I was always the one that would talk to this person, you know, and I'm also very interested in people, especially ones who had different experiences than poker, but made it to the top of their field, which now they can play these high roller tournaments for fun. It's a whole different experience than the poker player one, which of course I've done myself. I'm familiar with so many people. And I feel like it's just something that's it's like an art of lost. It's like an art that's lost almost. You know, you go into a casino and your host is going to welcome you. You feel like you're welcomed into this space. And, you know, you might go play a poker tournament and no one even said a word to you. It doesn't seem like really much fun. And then the unfortunate side of it too is a lot of the people who are even going to be friendly with you are going to try to invite you to their home game, which is a whole nother horrible thing for the game, which I've made a lot of friends who are recreational players. I've never made a home game or tried to invite them to my home game to make money off of them. I see it, and I think this is a lot of people in the world just have this limited approach of what's best for me right now is the path that I'm going to take, where actually I think that it's a horrible path, the one that's trying to take advantage of a person that you fortunately meet in this scenario. So, you know, you're in this scenario with clearly intelligent people that have found a route to make it to the top and a different one than your own. And you're a poker player who thinks about all these things. And the more information like you have, the better you can make any decisions. So I feel like why would you ever want to connect with a good person and try to make a short-sighted move like how can I make money off of this person instead of like, hey, let me see if I actually have a connection with the person. Do we think alike in some aspects, and wind up in a situation where not one of the either is looking to gain advantage on the other. And a lot of times you even see it where I would see a recreational player ask a pro, you know, did I play this hand like well? And they would just lie to their face where, you know, there's so many spots in poker. You can tell a person who's here playing for fun if they made the correct play or not just to save your whatever you have in your mind for EV. So I think we went down kind of a bad way recently where everything is thought of more in what's best for me right now. And you're even seeing that in the industry of online poker, giving as little as they possibly can and kind of always upping their side, upping administration fees and fees for deposits and withdrawals, kind of milking the cow as much as it possibly can, because we're on this like I'd say place that too many of us are thinking, and not just poker in the world, but I guess because I see poker players in a more advanced, so poker players are the ones who, you know, accepted a life that has nothing guaranteed. So already they jumped into something of belief in themselves and belief to do something different than the world tells you to do. So, and I think it's something where you learn these skills in poker, but unless if you really reflect on the lessons that you learn and try to translate them to life, you're kind of just going to miss the whole process of what you learned. And the skill of problem solving that poker teaches you can really be applied to anything in the world, because any decision that you're making, anything that you're doing, it's all based on the information that you have and making the best decision in the moment that you can. So poker, has you calm in this setting where lots of pressures under you, and you have to make these tough, tight decisions, and you don't see many translating it to life. It's interesting. Life is interesting. And at the same time, I would say that I rewind to me 5 years ago, and all I thought about was poker. I didn't apply any of these things really to life. I had in my mind that I was doing such a great job and had this balance in life, and was at such like a great point where then once I make it, let's say, a year out of that, you start to think like, how could you have possibly thought you had any balance? The only thing that you were actually thinking about or doing was playing poker. So, and I think it's like that, life is such a humbling experience, really, where especially the harder you try, the more difficult lessons that life is going to give you. But at the same time, if you keep rising to the challenge, they'll keep coming, and you can keep growing along this like ladder that we're on. But at the same time, if you're not willing to completely destroy like the thought of yourself and how you see almost everything, you're going to have a hard time adapting to the changing times of the world, because you're stuck in one kind of thinking. And I think everything relates to poker, it goes back to like poker too. There aren't many people who really crushed for 10, 15, 20 years because they had a style that was good in their time, and the game evolved, and usually they didn't put in the work. They kind of got to the top of the hill, let's say. A perfect example is Tom Dwan was killing everybody, crushing heads up, kind of got to the top of the hill, and got a bit comfortable. Game changes, and the way that it changes a bit, then comes like the Jungle Man, Isildur era, where it's like a new whole way of thinking that took all of the ways of Tom's thinking and how he played and translated it to a new level. And he kind of didn't work on his game. He was, sitting at the nosebleed games, wasn't getting action, wasn't getting to sharpen his skills. While on the same time, Isildur was playing all day, every day, 24 hours a day, sharpening his skills at the highest level. So it's like then when they reached like the same point, Isildur was ready for it, and Tom really kind of got lazy on the top of his thing. And we've seen there have been a lot of that through poker. So it kind of just highlights more that if you're not willing to change with the times are really going to eat you alive. If you stay stuck in this way of thinking and way of being. So, and then at the same time, it's I don't know if tough is the right word. It's like a beautiful journey of growth, life, but it's a humbling, rip your whole like thoughts of everything apart, wind up in the dirt, have to pull yourself like out of it, laugh at yourself for, things that people might, go crazy about, but just like pull yourself back together and, take all of it and use it like as a bag of tools for that next phase.
I mean, your experience, obviously, you're sharing your experience, the way you experience life, but obviously you were the guy who said he was going to become number one, right? And you already mentioned, yeah, that's going to be quite a humbly road. But in the same time, I think if you set very high goals, this is kind of the benefit, then you can also experience the most amount of growth, right? Obviously, you have experienced a lot of variance in your life, but therefore, you've also you also managed to grow as much as possible. Whereas if a lot of people, they just play poker just to get by, I think it's kind of a wasted opportunity. Like you said, you can learn a lot about life if you set a high goal in poker, like, for example, becoming number one. Now, not everyone has to necessarily try to become number one, but at least I think setting the goal makes you open up your mind to the possibilities. Well, I want to become number one. Well, what should I then try to be doing to become number one? And then if you have the belief that you can actually become number one, when these obstacles come, you just see it as, hey, these are opportunities to learn. Where if someone doesn't really have that confidence, they might see it as like, oh, you see, it's not for me. And they quit and they go back into comfort. And then they won't have the same experience that you have, right? they won't
Yeah.
have had the same amount of growth.
Yeah, because if you accept comfort, then you're never pushing your limits or pushing the boundaries that like you've set out for yourself that are never comfortable. But yeah, if you don't go through it, then life is going to be that, it'll be a comfortable one, that there won't be much growth. You might watch a lot of sports games and drink a lot of beer and kind of coast through this life without learning much, or, take the one that you might make it to the top. You might make it to the top, have like this high level of like trust in the community, integrity of yourself and how you act in all settings. And you might have that just destroyed overnight in some way that, you could have never imagined. And, your whole idea of yourself, what you're doing in life, it's like back to the drawing board. It's, you make it to the top of this mountain, and all of a sudden, you're wiped to the bottom again. So then it's a whole nother humbling experience, because how you feel and how people treat you when you're at the top of anything, and then how you feel or how people treat you when you're at the bottom, is such a different reality that unless if you really have that acceptance of whatever happens and belief that it's all for like this greater good, and that life always, it's like life tests, it gives you what you can, it's like what's the saying, life gives you what you can handle, not what you want. So you see yourself as this strong, I always saw myself as a strong person that could carry others on my back, let's say. That's kind of how I thought about it, that I would carry my family on my back, whatever they need, I could fight for them. I was strong enough, focused enough to like keep going up. And then, you start carrying more and more on your back until one day, it all crashes on you again too. And this whole like experience that you could do everything and you could carry all these people on your back and it's no problem, washes away into like something new. And hey, now how am I even looking at life? And how am I acting? How am I perceived by other people? Because, that's a whole nother thing in itself, where I've always been, since my dedication is so much, I've always been very hard on myself to be better, to grow, not in the sense that I say bad things to myself, but to the sense that I'm pushing my limits continuously, while at the same time I'm doing a lot of good for a lot of people. But while I was in this chasm, and being from New York, I speak fast, I speak direct, I see things in a different way. I kind of can hit to the target really, where it's like my thinking was, I'm the soft person who enters like the room. I'm always trying to help everybody. You start to realize yourself later. It's like, no, you're this like crazy intense person that's hard on everyone. Yes, it's because you're hard on yourself and you're only giving them a small bit of the hardness that you have on yourself. Where at the same time, is that how you want to, be seen in the world? Or can you harness that intensity and, be able to spread the same message with calmness and with love instead of with sharpness and directness? Because since all of us especially are wired very differently, there are some people that, if you hit just straight with harshness and directness, you'll never be able to touch any bit of like them actually listening to the message that you're trying to give them. Where it's like poker, you have to come with a different approach in every setting that you're in. And unless if you're mindful and you even understand what does it mean to breathe, like, yeah, I know first time someone who, was a bit more advanced to breathing, or a lot more advanced to breathing, they asked me, well, like, how do you breathe? Your first thought, like, is, what do you mean?
Like, what the fuck? What do you mean?
I breathe like everybody else. What kind of like thought is that? How do I breathe? Then it's like, no, you don't understand. You're not actually breathing. Like, you're not breathing through your nose. You're like a mouth breather. You're not like taking in air a lot of times. You're not mindful of your breath. This whole mechanic that can work so well to your advantage of keeping your cool under intense circumstances. And it's like, wait, I had no idea about this. And that's the amazing thing about life. There are all these different pods of information, gifts, things that you can incorporate into your way of being to be just a better version of yourself. So
But this was the thing, right? Like if you for example set the goal to become number one and someone tells you, hey, you're not breathing right, your brain starts to link, wait, so if I breathe better, I can concentrate more, I perform more under pressure. Hey, I want to become number one. Hey, that seems like something, whereas if you're just working in the supermarket, and you're putting in the bottles in the shower and someone says, hey, you're breathing, you're like, yeah, okay. Like what is breathing better? Can I fill this shell in a faster way? What, like, why would that matter to me?
But I would challenge you there, because I would say that it all depends of the determination that the person that you run into has.
For sure.
Because they can be at a point where they're stocking things in a grocery store, but they might see themselves at somewhere completely different. So it's like, that's why life will kind of, let's say, give
but
you.
But then they see this breathing as an opportunity for this bigger picture that they already have. If they don't have the bigger picture, they're not going to interpret their breathing as a way, like sort of a path or one of the tools that they can use in order to get to that better life, if you get what I mean.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's definitely true, which is then they would just go in the bucket of the people who are looking for comfort in their life. And,
exactly.
might as well count those people out. If you're looking for comfort, it's probably the wrong podcast to listen to be honest.
Yes, no, this is definitely not a podcast for comfort.
If you want to
you mentioned something yeah,
imagine if you want to imagine big dreams and push your boundaries and believe what others might tell you is impossible, then I might be the right cup of tea for you.
Then this is the pod to listen to. You mentioned all the way in the beginning as well, right, that you get a lot of motivation out of taking care of your siblings. You feel a certain amount of responsibility. This can be very motivating. Obviously, when it becomes too much, I think, like you experienced, it can also just, the weight is too much. Then it becomes actually feel like pressure. I actually had the same when I was just, living a single life. Was playing a bit of poker. It was like, if it all goes to shit, I'll just go back to my hometown, But then suddenly, I got married, moved in together with my wife, and I was supporting my wife financially. It was like, hey, wait, oh shit, I actually have to now do my best, because I don't no longer only feel for myself, and I also feel for others. I do remember this gave me like a certain amount of motivation that I think you're describing as well. I also wanted to touch on like the creativity part that you keep on coming back to. If you want to become number one, and you encounter a problem, let's say you encounter a tough opponent, he's in the way of you becoming number one. If your goal is not to become number one, you might just quit. Whereas, if you want to become number one, you have to go through this guy. So it really helps you think on a whole nother level. It's like, okay, quitting is not an option. How am I going to beat this guy? That's when you really start to think. And that's when you can really come up with more creative strategies. And that's, I think, nowadays when people kind of think, the game is solved anyway, so there's no room. Well, it's more like that. It's that mentality that stops you from being creative. Not the game and the solver area to a certain degree does, but it's way more how you come. It's way more your mindset, I think, that limits you in terms of the creativity than the actual where poker currently is headed.
Yeah, but then I think also, the way that I saw it is that, well, let's start with this one mushroom trip that I had. So I'm sitting in a place in Mount Shasta. So it's kind of like in the woods. I have this log cabin. It's during COVID. Everything is locked down around the world, but I created this kind of haven for myself. I set up gym, like a nice setting to not really feel the intensity that the cities around the world were feeling. So I was sitting there with one friend one day, ate like a bit of mushrooms. I'm sitting in the office, and it's happened multiple times where you're on mushrooms and something asks you if you have any questions, or at least personally, that's what's happened. You feel something that the question is, do you have any questions? My response always up until that date was, I'm very happy with what you've given me so far. Just keep giving me, what I need in the moment. This time, for some reason, it just popped in my head. And I was doing really well in poker at the time. I think it might have even been after I became number one. So I had the biggest winning year of all time in 2019. It was just an unbelievable year where I won every big tournament, even main event like Aussie Millions too. So my question at this point, and it was the only time I asked a question actually, was why is it that others like in poker can't compete with me? And the response that I got was because you're not competing. So it made me think of that, because when you're then talking about, if you're trying to become number one, you have to run into this certain person. It's true, you're going to wind up at the table with this person. But at the same time, the best approach may even be to kind of tread water and not step in too much, because, you see this person as someone who's very good and pots against you, thinks well, but maybe you think that their weakness is that they call too loose against weaker opponents. You almost then can, as long as not stepping on any mines, you can almost just tiptoe around that person and just make it through them, instead of feeling like you're actually in competition with anyone, or because you're always wound up with a situation to make a decision, and it's only on you to make the best decision that you can. So I guess that message that they were giving me on this trip was that my competition and my drive was always with myself. I never thought like, you have to outperform this person or that person, or, this is your target and you have to beat them. It's like, no, you're at a challenge with yourself to be the best version of yourself always, to make the right decision in the spot. And sometimes that'll wind up in a hand with this person, play the best that you can. And sometimes you'll wind up in hands versus other weaker opponents where you can really maximize the advantages that you have.
Yeah, it's true, especially in like tournaments. Like obviously this wouldn't be true in a heads up format. That's more like King of the Hill, where you have to just go through someone. But especially like you can be someone can be better in an actual poker hand. But if you construct your strategies, if you maneuver around the table, and if you're better at other aspects, you might be the better player overall. It's like something that when you were talking about that, it's more about yourself. Remember me of an interview of Conor McGregor where he was fighting, I think, Jose Aldo. And then they were asking about Jose Aldo, and he said, listen, it's not about Jose Aldo. You're not against Jose Aldo. You're against yourself in there in the ring, he said. Who the fuck is Jose Aldo? It's me against myself, he said. It's more like a mental game. That's kind of what reminded me. It's like you are kind of only playing against yourself. If you manage to show up good, you can beat anyone. That's kind of what he was trying to say. I just focus on showing up as my best version. Then I don't care who comes in my way. I will just, hit him with my left hook, and
if you put in the work, if you put in the work that you're more prepared than the person that you're in there with, then you're going to come out on top over and over again. So I think it was just kind of like that, even though the obstacles of being millionaire, negative millionaire all along like that road to be number one, it's just like, you're then just in competition with yourself to pick yourself up, to be better, to perform the places that you show up as, where I then think it's also important not overexhausting yourself and having fun and making sure that you show up when you feel like you're ready to show up, and not just showing up because you feel like you have to show up.
Yeah, I'm sure many players can relate. The days that you sit down because you have to sit down might not really show the same performance as the day you really feel like, hey, I'm ready to perform today.
It's like a lot of times, I even so like when I would think about a super high roller tournament, like let's say the beginning days of that were 100K buy-ins that PokerStars ran. They were 3-day long tournaments. For me, if you in a full 3-day tournament, like the Triton one, for example, it's so intense and you use so much energy, at least personally myself, to get through that my then approach really was, okay, so I know that the time that I need to be my best is on day 2 and day 3, which means that if I'm not ready to play that day 2 and 3, I'm going to be ready to play my best, maybe sit out on day 1. So there were many tournaments that there's a big long series that's going on. You might have ran deep in a tournament before that. Always the thought is, okay, I've got to jump right in that because I have EV to jump in. And it goes along like the same GTO strategy. And it doesn't really matter if you're following a playbook of what you're supposed to do, because then the playbook says, your exhaustion doesn't matter. The amount of sleep that you have doesn't matter. The amount of water and food, like, oh yeah, all of these things are nonsense. All that matters is that I've got this chart down that I've studied in my head and I'm ready to go to battle. And then I would just
think like, oh, I have like a certain B100 in the early stages, and that's just a number, and they don't. It seems like you zoom out more and like, well, I have to kind of manage my energy over a 3-day tournament. I think we had a podcast with Jans Arends, aka Grafdeck Online, and he said actually the same thing in these tournaments. I might late rec because these things are quite exhausting. And I think I heard back in the day, I think it was Vanessa Selps who was also talking about this, like, yeah, late rec, or in the first day, I don't pay too much attention. I don't want to waste too much energy. I am there, but you know, if I get a couple of hands, just try to stack the recreational player, and that's it. Day 2, I start to really use more of my energy. I think this is a more holistic point of view that I definitely think is very, very underrated by especially the new school players who just look at the numbers and the charts.
Yeah, and think that they need to study between day 1 and day 2 and sacrifice sleep for it. That was another thing that in my mind, that's like one of the most ludicrous things that I could ever imagine. Like when I think of what do I need to perform, sleep comes at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Every single time. So it's like
there's nothing you can study in a break or in end of day 1 to day 2 that actually gonna give you an edge. Rest is always gonna give you a bigger edge.
Yeah, so I was so surprised that, you know, these guys that I saw as the same level as myself, you know, talking about how they studied for 4 or 5 hours and then couldn't sleep, so only got 2-3 hours sleep before day 2. And I'm like, well, I don't want to talk to you guys too much about this, because there was another time where well, I always had like a different thinking process, and I think also that's why, you know, maybe other people who have this GTO approach tell themselves that I can't be as good or better than they are because I'm losing 0.1 BB by not defending Jack 4 off from the big blind and winding up in stupid spot where you're like getting bet pot on the turn with top pair, and now have to wind up in this like blender spot instead of just where you think that you have a huge edge in decision making versus the field that you're in. There's a whole grade of better or worse to better of those people always. You know, you don't have to do anything for something. And, you know, it brings back like a time that I forget what year it was. It must have been in like 2013, 2015. And it was in Monte Carlo, and there were a lot of high roller players. Like it was the time where, of the Germans, like Igor and Philbort were like at the top, and like the like Tobias Rankemeyer day. And there were like 15 guys who were playing high rollers at the time. And Philbort just says this story of a hand that he played in Macau in some tournament. And everyone's just on the same side of, yeah, you know, I would have played it the same way. So I'm like, well, I would have actually played it this way. So the start is everyone's like, you know, I don't think so. As I started to explain my thought process and why I would have actually played this hand this way, I shifted the whole room into thinking, wow, like that makes perfect sense. Like, I think that's the right way to play it. And that's when like a light bulb kind of went off in my head also of like, you know, that's the end of this, of like giving away the
I'm
way
not sharing
process.
anything anymore.
Yeah. So I kind of like became that, you know, lone wolf in the high stakes community. Like there are all these groups of people who study together, swap together, talk poker together. And then there was just me showing up, like myself, not talking poker to anyone, teaching a few people poker at certain times, always just playing, learning, never studying, like also studying, just not something that relates with me. You know, you tell me that this poker journey means that I have to study all these hours to make it to like number 1, I would say, wrong person, wrong game, like not interested, not fun. Let me find something else that like is actually fun.
But I mean, if you learn a lot, if you, for example, let's say you go out and play, and some people will learn from good plays others make and mistakes that you make. Let's say, for example, you make a mistake or you see one good play that someone else make, it puts you in a tough spot. You're like, you might pick that up straight away and add it to your game. Whereas, for example, me, I might have to make the mistake 5 times and have to face the situation 5 times before I learn it. So it could be that you're a very fast learner. Would you say that's true? In practice, like when you're being put in tough spots, you're like, hey, I can probably use this, or when you make mistakes?
Well, like one of the best compliments I think that I ever got from like a person was this guy, Connor Drennan, who was Blanco Negro online. Like, and what he said that he always would learn, like he would learn a lot from me. And he thought the skill that I had was that I adapted to the new style of play and was always ahead of the curve before others were ahead of the curve. So I guess I had that Well, I really immersed my whole life in it. I played poker all day, every day. Didn't really have much of a life apart from that. So I thought about poker all day, every day also. And like just my whole focus was being put on being better, improving. So it was always like adapting in these changing times of the game. So I think it then comes down to, because I put so much focus into it, I was more present in the way that the game was shifting than other people who were putting less focus on it.
Mm. Yeah, no, that actually makes a lot of sense. You actually also mentioned it was interesting about what you mentioned about the Jack 4 offhand, where this is just like you follow the chart. But for example, you were taking in consideration that, oh, let's say for example, the best guy who's left in the field opens the button and you have Jack 4 off. Well,
Yeah.
maybe your defend range when you're in the big blind versus the best guy who opens on the button should maybe look a bit different than if the worst guy in the tournament opens on the button, right?
Yeah.
We have the chart, and this is just like a start place that gives you an idea. Well, given the variables that plays, given the equity realization, given your, your showdown ability, how effective your bluffs are going to be on later street, etc. This is the chart. But obviously, you have to estimate for yourself. Well, for this guy who's way more passive, I can probably realize more equity, therefore I play more hands. Oh, this guy is very aggressive, going to put me in tough spots. Maybe, if I look ahead, like you said, Jack 4 off, face the pop bet, maybe I'll just fold straight away.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just not wind up like in this spot instead of just like in no man's land making a guess on the turn versus a guy who's very capable. And the other thing, I would love if you've got an answer for me. Okay, so let's say you're playing super high roller tournaments. Probably the biggest winner in the field, let's say, has a 20% ROI or something. Person who's playing the best, like in the time. If you believe to be the best or one of the best in the field, let's say that you have between 10 and 20% ROI, why would you be taking high variance spots where you're winning 0.1 BB?
I mean, that depends how certain you are that the play is good, because obviously I think in your mind it's like, well, it's very
there's a
small
whole different
edge.
thing. But there's a whole different thing of like good and has enough value for the situation that it's gonna put me in.
Yeah, but I mean, if you always make the correct play, this is the thing, right? It's in his confidence that he will actually make the correct play in all these situations. Because, and also it depends on, let's say, for example, the maximum you think you can gain by this hand is 0.1 BB, but if you screw it up, it's minus 1. Then best case scenario, you have to do it always right, you win 0.1. Worst case scenario, you lose 1. Then obviously that's not a fair return, right?
Of course.
So you always have to look at kind of your risk reward in this situation. But I would say if someone's taking on that spot, it's because he believes that that's actually a plus V spot, and he doesn't care if it's 0.1 or 0.5. He just feel like, hey, I'm being dealt this hand.
But if you're
it is true to a certain degree that if you take on, so this also depends kind of if you look at your table and how much future like plus V spots will be taken into consideration, because 0.1 brings with it a lot of variance, and it could actually knock you out of the tournament. So I would argue that if the rest of your table, if there's more plus 1 BB spots, then you should probably avoid the 0.1 BB spot, because it increases your risk of ruin, and you cannot capitalize on the future plus V spots.
I think a lot of people miss exactly what you said right there.
I don't even play tournaments.
That
I should hop into the tournament world.
Like, of course, there's good there. If you put yourself in a spot that you think that you're playing with, that you're one of the 5 best players in the world, and you're playing with the other 4 best players in the world, you have to take every plus 0.1 BB spot that you possibly have. But that's never really the case. So even if you wind up in a table, with 1 weak player in your mind, 2 weak players in your mind, and you're taking these big blind spots that are winning 0.1 BBs, but the opponent that you're up against is betting pot like almost all the time on the turn, your like risk ruin is nightmare in my mind to get such little of an edge.
Oh yeah, especially in tournaments. Like, again, you kind of go back to like a more bigger picture approach. And I would say that's definitely true. Like, for example, in a cash game, that doesn't really work like that to some degree. You could make an argument.
Doesn't work because you can reload.
The recreational is going to play for an hour, and I want to get as much hands in with the recreational. So this could be true. So you could actually pass on slightly winning EV spots pre-flop just to get more hands in versus recreational. Yeah, that is an argument, but I agree with you that in a tournament you have to probably zoom out way more. So I agree actually with your philosophy here. It really depends on what other opportunities there are to make money. But exactly what you're describing here is just like the chart expects a certain amount of equity realization. And for example, if you make a preflop chart and you give the turn a pop bet or an over bet, or if you limit that to 3/4, well, guess what? If you limit it to 3/4, we can now suddenly defend more hands because we don't face that pop bet. So it sounds like you're really good at kind of mapping out, looking ahead in hands, but also in the whole tournament. Like not even this hand, but like future hands. So you kind of look around and see what the opportunities are and try to maneuver yourself in these more plus V opportunities and kind of avoid the marginal high risk to ruin spots. That's kind of how it sounds like.
Yeah, because then, another thing, it goes back to you can relate poker to life always. It's like in this poker tournament, you have a limited amount of resources. There's exactly what you have right there. So you have to use your resources like in the best way, because your goal is that you can't run out of resources. So if that is, winding up in lots of tough spots, it's going to be very tough because, you might make some good decisions, some bad ones, but if you wind up kind of trying to steer away from those like ruin spots versus people on your level or close or maybe confident at that time or feeling good that day. Another thing I've never heard anyone else talk about in poker is, I would walk into a high roller tournament and what I would do is really map out the room before the event even starts. And I would have a feeling of who's confident, who's winning, who's losing, who you should go after that day, who you should stay away from. And before the tournament even starts, I've got like a strategy versus different people in my head. Now your table formulates and you have these people, and now you have this approach of based on the presence, the presence and calmness that the person and confidence that the person is in that day, and then how you want to steer your own ship in which direction.
But if you think about it, this to me makes perfect sense, because what you're saying is a more, let's say for example you play versus me when I feel more confident. I'm gonna play my A game. That means I'm gonna take up better spots. If I play against a hand to you and I keep on making better decisions, that's gonna cost your AV. So your defend range or your VPIP range or whatever range, the range that you're gonna play against me should look different based on if I'm confident or not, because that's going to determine how effective your plays are going to be and how much pressure I'm going to be putting on you. Because if I'm underconfident, I might be giving up more rivers, for example. Therefore, you get to call down with lower pairs because you get to showdown more often, right?
Yeah. Plus then, like, since I allowed my like creativity to run wild, let's say, there are many more possibilities of things that you can do and maneuver with that someone else might dictate as that's just inherently wrong, where there's so many actually pieces to that to say something is right or wrong, because you're not in a vacuum.
Yeah, exactly. But when he says it's wrong, it's through the lens and the variables that he's calculating in his head that make up for a plus V or minus V play. Where, for example, in the German, where you kind of throw your examples out there, you probably threw some variables out there that suddenly shift his range to a completely different range that they were perceiving, and they're like, given this information that you just gave and these variables, and his range actually looks like this, you're probably right. This is a better play.
Yeah, well, plus because you're at war too, so any way you can almost influence your opponent's thinking in the wrong direction, the better you're going to do in war. So, I think I've only spoken about it one time before, and maybe you heard of it. Damn, I lost my train of thought.
Well, we're going to war, you said. I'm very curious what's going to follow.
I fell off.
Let's hope this doesn't happen when you're actually at war.
Oh, okay, I got it again. I knew I'd get there again. Okay, so, for example, for a long time, people were playing online and they used Poker Tracker. So the way that they thought was really based on the numbers that they saw that you played. It was the early days of Poker Tracker. They didn't have all these intricate numbers that they have today. It might not work, what I did in the times of today. But what I would do is, anytime I was playing a buy-in that was the smaller size of my range, I would play this absolutely insane game to just throw my numbers completely off of how often I open, how often I 3-bet. Like my numbers were just like so skewed in the opposite side, which was just like trying to make people think incorrectly in the big spots that they wound up having against me. Where then when I graduated to live poker and I was playing 250 million buy-ins, 100K buy-ins, what I would then, I still continued the same approach. In the 25K tournaments, I played some of the most insane hands ever. And people just had it then in their mind that they've seen me do this in this spot versus this person in this exact same scenario. And then I just wind up tightening my range in like the higher stakes and just have it over and over again when the stakes are 4 to 10x the size.
So it was like your advertisement budget.
Yeah, yeah. And you know,
Nice.
if you look at everything right in front of you, you're looking to make, and then you know, of course, everything in poker relatable to life. You know, it's like if you're looking at it right in front of you and trying to make the most EV in the moment that you're in right now, you miss out on the big picture and what you could actually gain from the situation that you're in. Where if you know, you take a step back, pass on some of these plus EV potential spots for a bigger picture for a different reason, you wind up maybe navigating your river easier.
This is some very smart stuff. What I used to do, and like the guys that I used to play with, what we would do, if we would figure out, okay, we're playing against someone who's also very exploitative, uses poker tracker, instead of like basing my decision on his HUD stats, I would then look at my own HUD stats and based on my own HUD stats, figure out, well, if I play against myself, would I be more likely to do this for value as a bluff? And then you can kind of, well, I know that I don't do this, and I know that you look at my game, so actually I'm now gonna do this because I never do this, and vice versa. So then you get it whole, and the other guy's he's just look at your stats like, nah, he never bluffs here, fold. But you're like, I looked at my stats and I know I never bluff here, therefore I bluff because I know you look at my stats. It's like, you know. And he's like that now. There's probably some more news kit solver kids listening. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't know the game went deeper than just following the charts.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope you know we're triggering. You know, we're having a more creative conversation. I hope we're triggering more fun in people. I wanna quickly bring it back to, you mentioned that now you prioritize sleep, your health, right? Because I guess you realized that yeah, you perform better when you're healthy. Surprise, surprise. But the first year your first year of your poker career, you mentioned you were very overweight, right? You're just clicking buttons. When was like the first big success that you had when you started your professional poker career? So I think you mentioned you played for a whole year online. You missed the WCOOP event. You were like, fuck this, school is messing up with my WCOOP schedule, I'm out. When was like the first big success that you had in poker?
Like actually right away when I started playing on Poker Stars, the first night actually I ever played on Poker Stars, I deposited $50, and by the end of the night I was playing 100, 200 limit hold'em with like 4K. It was the biggest game on Stars. I had 4K in my account, and you even had, it was the time where you had to request to play in the game, and you would get a call from Lee Davey, really, who was poker room manager at the time, kind of vetting you to see that you could, you know, afford the swings of 100, 200 limit. So he gets me on the phone. He's like, hey, you know, with this 4,000 balance, you know, it can go really fast in the game. And I was like, oh, you know, don't worry. I got lots more where that came from, where, you know, that was all the money that I had, that I just, you know, threw a random $50 on there that I, you know, before I ever made any money. So I wound up losing that night in 100, 200. The next week I deposited a little bit again. I won a $3 rebuy, I think, for 3,000 or so. Within the next 6 months, I was back to 100, 200 limits, spinning like a roll from nothing to 250K and losing it all. So that was, I started at, say, at maybe 19 was the time I did that, where I spun and lost like 250. The first time, and then I played a few tournaments that I could, a Turning Stone tournament in upstate New York. It was just a 1K buy-in. I was 19 years old. That was my first cash ever for 30,000 or so. I think in the next year I went and cashed a WPT in Niagara Falls. But it was the first time I spun up $1 million playing poker. I was 20 years old. That was gone within the year. Then I think by the time I spun up that, the next one might have been that 3.5 spin up that I think was like 22, maybe I was, and I was just like kind of lingering around like from then, kind of just had this build up to something, lose it all, go back from scratch, build it up again, lose it all again. Just like keep having fun and keep playing.
I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. Quick reminder, Mechanics of Poker 2.0 coaching program is currently open for enrollment, and we've put together the biggest promotion ever. 25% off on the program and 3 bonuses worth close to 3,000 euros of free value. Enrollment is open for the first couple of weeks of January before we close the program permanently. So don't miss out. Go over to mechanicsofpoker.com, sign up now, and let me and Adam help you achieve your poker goals in 2024. I'm very curious. Adam, when was the last time you turned $1 million into 0 and went back to $1 million again?
Never.
For me as well, never. So maybe we haven't taken enough risk in our careers.
Yeah, so
it's not for all.
yeah, I'd love to dive in here because I feel like your story is so unique. And normally I try to pinpoint like one rock bottom moment, and we try to focus a bit of the conversation on that. But for you, there's just rock bottoms everywhere. And I really want to talk about how you navigate these, because I think it's going to be super important for the listener. And you mentioned something, can you hold onto the roller coaster? And I want to dive into that. So for you, we've got these massive peaks, making $1 million, losing $1 million, making $1 million, losing $1 million. And this is happening a lot. Like, it's never happened to me, never happened to Rene, probably never happened to most people listening. But for you, this is quite a normal thing. And you mentioned you are good at digging yourself out of a hole. So I want you to talk to us about how you deal mentally and what you do on a practical level when you do go from plus $1 million to negative $1 million.
Yeah, so actually it pops up into my mind, like, and I'll try to navigate through an exact like scenario and how I was feeling and how I got through it in the time. This was maybe the 3rd time that I went from millionaire to negative to then built it up again and lost it all again. I was in London, and it was kind of crazy actually, because I started that year, I'd lost it all, started that year with a very small amount, really just grinded through it. And by the time that time in September, I was looking at maybe exactly $1 million roll again. And I had a friend who was doing some business that kind of convinced me that it was, something that I should get into. And the business was actually on paper doing really well. The person who got me into the business, I think, didn't really manage it fairly and took advantage. A lot of people are out there to take advantage of you, unfortunately. So I wind up in that spot where, so at this time, I was actually on a high from poker. I had like $1 million I was winning. And I had on paper that this other deal was supposed to go through. And on this other deal, I had another $1.5 million that was coming to me. But I had to guarantee like some of it, and the way that it was managed by the person who set up the deal was, I can't imagine any way that other than it was set out with bad intentions, but at the same time, I put like my word and my name on it. So I wind up that I find out that the deal just went bad. So not only am I not getting the 1.6 mil like that was coming to me from that deal, but I vouched for like a big number of like that deal. So then I had to go from, okay, I'm on this high, I'm winning in poker, I'm feeling great. Now it all really crashes down. Now I'm in a spot where the $1 million that I have, it's if I'm going to honor what I agreed to, I've got to pay the whole $1 million, and I think I was maybe negative $1.5 million to 2 million or something was the thing that was agreed on. So I'm in London at the time, and I would never say it wasn't devastating. It was completely devastating. So not to downplay it and say, oh, piece of cake, whatever, crushed right through it. But the thing that I did do was, I said to myself that and I have this approach that I say to myself that no matter whatever's happened has already happened. And if you want to progress and move along this mountain, you have to accept that. You can't let it hanging over your head. You can't let that dictate your existence and your opportunity to attain higher levels of yourself and life, let's say. So I said to myself, I was in this flat in London and I said, okay, the deal is when you leave this flat, you have to just accept it and forget about it. So during that week, I really shut off my phone. I just wanted to disconnect from everything. I ordered some Nando's, some nice delivery foods in London. I smoked a lot of weed. I watched just, movies, things to take my mind off of it. And I would say that I was able to leave that apartment, and instead of looking at it as something that's, like a thorn in me or something that's dragging me down, use it as armor and take it with you to make you stronger. So that happened in early October of that year. So there was a bit of a period where you need to decompress a bit. There were no tournaments or nothing that was going on because WCOOP just ended. There was nothing really for the next month and a half. So I wound up in I think it was the first Triton that I ever played in Manila. I don't remember the year, 2016 it must have been. Yeah, 2016 it was. And I flew over to Manila. I actually flew the night of my birthday. I spent my birthday November 1st with my family in New York. My flight was on November 2nd at 2 a.m. from New York to go to Manila. I got there. I wound up getting second place in the main event there. But so not many people really knew what had happened to me because I kind of keep to myself, like in poker. I don't broadcast like myself or things that are going on much. So most people don't really have an idea about me. They might think that they do, but unless if they've listened to like my way of thinking in this podcast, they probably are way off. So I'm hanging out with one of two friends that knows about what happened. And in Manila, he just looks at me and he says, he's just like, he pounds me and he says, if you would have asked me, I would have been sure that you come here, you start complaining about this and that, and in this like type of mood. It's like, as soon as I saw you when you got here, you just had like kill in your eyes. Like you just had focus. I didn't hear a single word about, this bad thing that happened to me. So I think that people recreate trauma or difficult scenarios that they go through into their present moment, and it kind of haunts their whole existence. And unless if you really, if you're on this journey that you trying to be the best version of yourself, hoping for, great things in whichever way you want them, you're gonna have to have like, that strength, that armor to make it through the tough times. And if you just, I would say a lot of people give their power away, claiming to be a victim of life instead of grasping their own power that exists in life. And if you go that route and blame your environment, you blame people, you blame luck for the reason why you're not at the place that you want to, you're going to have there's no chance that you're actually going to get there. But if you can just hone it all, accept that you're going to continuously make mistakes, not let them drown you, but allow them to enable your growth into a better version of yourself, then you can probably go on this road.
There's a level of acceptance there, which is fascinating. And I wonder for you, is this been something that you've throughout your life been good at, where things go badly, you've been able to just go, okay, this is it, can't change it, and move on quickly, and then you've been able to transition that to poker? Or is it something that you picked up during the swings, during the downswings? Because the way you described it there sounds perfect. Just put it to bed, leave the room and go, right, the million's done, on to the next thing, and try to be as present in the moment. However, for most people who try that, they will hold on to the story. They'll hold on to the baggage. They'll take that negative energy from what's just happened, the victim mode that you talked about, and they'll try to forget about it, but they can't really accept what just happened because it feels unfair to them. But for you, it just feels like you're able to just go back into the moment as your friend noticed in you, you had the killer mode in your eye. Have you always been able to accept when things go bad in life?
I think that it's because I don't really see it as going bad because I've been so blessed always. Like even I have like this root of myself that is just kind of always been happy with life, with how things are. I feel like I have like, no trauma or difficult things that happened as a childhood. So I see like the difficulties that I go through, I see them as softer than like, some difficulties that some people go through. And I think then what like popped up was like life giving you what you can manage. So I think that from a young age, like my whole reality was very intense. Like I come from amazing upbringing, but there's 5 of us. I'm the oldest, and my parents, and I would say that everyone's a very unique and intense individual, and we all grew up in a small space. So things were, even though there was lots of love around, there was intensity. So it's like I was, or like I came in contact with intensity at like early age, and I didn't shy away from it. I accepted it, where if I said, this is too intense, life wouldn't really be able to continue like that ladder of intensity. So I feel like because I accepted intensity, was focused on growth, even through that storm, life as it progressed, knew that I could take higher and higher levels of intensity. So it's like, since I, accepted, it's was it choose your own adventure? My adventure is like the intense adventure for sure. Even something like when I was in high school, I was not well liked by the other guys in the school, and it was really nothing other than I dressed differently than they did, and I was confident in myself. And just comes to the, people hate what they don't understand. So I feel like, it's a whole different experience for everyone. I feel like I get a bit of that. I've always gotten a bit of that, from high school, from, being the top of anything, with having confidence, that some people would, look at confidence and say, well, why does this person deserve to have confidence when I'm sitting here like feeling terrible about myself? But at the same time, if you want to change your reality, you want to actually focus on, okay, well, what can I learn from this person, instead of, okay, I want to try to bring them down with me. That's why you see people who are winners in life, they don't badmouth other people. Real people who are confident, are confident in themselves, and they don't focus, or really, you learn not to care what other people think about you. So then then there's a whole different level of that. So I had that as a child where, I was just confident in the way that I was myself, that even though these people were projecting this other feeling towards me, I let's say, created something that I didn't let it get to me. So I was able to, manage that well. And then just in the same way, you progress in levels. So it's like, then that was the point of, people saying something to your face, maybe talking behind your back. Then because I progressed through that level, and I guess for whatever humbling reasons that it needed to happen, and that it was meant to happen, it's like, then when I went through that time where Martin just blasted me on the internet, that's like a whole new level of that same type of story where, here, now it's a whole different picture. Before, it was in your high school hall rooms, it was people in this small circle that knew you, it was people in some small community. Now, like, the whole world, who has really no idea about you because you don't really talk much and keep to yourselves. Now this new picture has been put out, which in my opinion couldn't be farther from like the picture of reality. But then you have to go through this period also where, you know, you're at like a higher level of this difficult game that you're in. And, you know, it's, you can't say it's anything other than shit, you know, the things that, because for me, okay, to be someone that existed in negative bankrolls, there has to be a reason that you're able to get into negative bankrolls. My whole reason that I was able to get credit, to stay in action when I didn't have money, is because people trusted me, trusted my integrity, knew if I had won that I would pay them instantly. I might have made them money, like playing or them buying a piece of me in something, and that was like how I could maneuver my credit line. My whole existence always from poker has been, okay, the most important thing is your integrity and your word and staying like true to them, not just because where it's going to get you there. These are the things that were just really always important to me. I think I really self-examine myself a lot. You know, sometimes you're warp speed into some way that you don't really see it for like a little bit, but really try to be introspective and at the same time willing to take constructive criticism from the people around you. So, you know, now I'm in this spot where the things that I deemed the most valuable and held myself the most accountable to, now I'm being run through the mud that I'm this other person. And because a lot of people like to equate or like to imagine that the reason why someone had success is because they were taking advantage, or they were cheating or doing this and the other, which then the crazy thing comes is, even though the allegations that he said against me there had nothing to do with myself playing and any of the money that I actually won from poker, it branded that, okay, now it's, you know, Bryn Kenney, the cheater, and alleged cheater is everything that I heard every time that it came on. And it doesn't matter if, you know, it came from one source and you dealt with 1,000 people in your life. And, you know, if you grilled tons of successful poker players, they'd say that I ran an above board ship for my whole life and never asked anyone to do anything. But then it doesn't matter really. You know, all of this, it really doesn't matter because it all just like crashed on you. So now, like, to explain yourself and to try to prove yourself innocent is really, you know, something you're like fighting with the wall against. So it's like, okay, well, how can I just like, even though it's something that's difficult to accept, how can I accept that this happened? Reality is different than it was yesterday. And what can I take from this experience and learn from it? And like, because my whole mindset has, well, the way I see it is you learn the most in your most difficult times. And I always saw it that way in poker. So it's like, okay, can I take those lessons in poker now and kind of translate into life and accept? Now it's like the higher level of also, it's like all of those things interjecting at the same time, like the level that you're at of acceptance of what's happened, the level that you're at of, you know, being of people talking about you, all of these different like levels that you've reached, the point that it could hit here somehow hits for a reason, for, I would say, for a humbling experience for you to be able to, because I would say what it then does is, since the real truth of things is you can focus on yourself, you can't really focus on anyone else. And if you focus on yourself and you prove the person you are, that's, you know, you don't live to the standards of what anyone can see. So then it's like, but can you live this same type of way when it's all, you know, firestorm around you? And it's like another, it's like another thing. It's difficult. You know, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. At the same time, I wished it on myself, I guess, while, you know, asking for this like rocky, not rocky road, but different road that makes it to somewhere that has much more challenges.
But amazing. Wow. It's so interesting listening to you speak. It's so inspiring to hear how you navigate life and how you deal with adversity. Yeah, so fascinating how you are able to use adversity to, as you mentioned, armor up. And it's all in this big quest, just become a better version of yourself and playing this leveling game, which, yeah, I think is super fascinating.
Well, it's like life's a video game, right? So it's just like, you know, and why not be and I think I fail so much. I guess that's too why like life is also always humbling, even for the people that are trying the hardest, because when you're in the moment, you see things in like this vacuum almost. that it's not till you can pull yourself out of it that you really see yourself and see the way that you are.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, the bigger picture, yeah, of what it's all for. And yeah, I love how you mentioned as well, like everything happens for a reason, and life's hitting you at the point you're at to give you a test that will either humble you or you'll learn from. And it's exactly what's supposed to happen at this moment. There's no avoiding it. This is it. And it's pass or
yeah.
fail. And you either move on to the next level or you stay where you are. And as you mentioned with your kind of journey, these kind of why am I keep going negative a million? There was lessons that were happening during that allowed you wanted to deal with it, to learn from it, but it was a kind of something you had to learn from to go to the next level so you didn't return back to that point.
For sure. And then I don't want to get into it too much right now, but then there's like a whole nother thing of I see something of where I want to be in the future. So all of the things in the past are for a greater good in my mind.
Yeah.
So it's like, because I have this, and then to like throw in the same, since I have this experience that if I see something, I can turn it into reality. You know, everyone has a different experience. My experience is that, you know, anyone can say whatever they want about that, but you know, I saw it in magic, I made it reality. I saw it in poker, I made it reality. So for me, it's like, that's just really truth. So if I can see something down the road, even if it's something that's so big, I've harbored like that belief from the experience that I have that nothing really is too big. And now it's just a new road that life put you on that has all of these different twists and turns to see if you can hold on to the ride and until where it goes.
Love it.
And like all of this, then it's like the fuel too. That's like the fuel to get you there, since like that end for me personally equates to helping as many people, doing as much good as possible. Then that means that if I give up, no matter how difficult the situation that I'm in right now, that means my real dream and goal of this life is impossible. And then why did I do everything that I've done to get to here to give up?
So powerful. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, that was amazing. Listening to you speak about your journey, and it reminds me of the hero's journey. I'm sure you're familiar with that concept. And for you, the journey is quite clear to get to the top of the mountain and be like the #1 player in the world. And for you, it's about leveling up your character to get to that end point. And I think it's really fascinating, as you've mentioned, that every time you're at a certain level, life challenges you. Life challenges you to grow, to get better, and you've got to improve to almost like past that level to get to the next one. It's like the video game analogy of leveling up your character. And for you, I think what's been very interesting to listen to is how much you were aware, or you even are aware now, but as the journey's unfolding, you are aware there's a bigger journey going on. There's a bigger mountain I'm climbing, and this is all part of the bigger picture. I think people really struggle with this because they get so absorbed in what is happening now, and the current moment, the mood of the current moment, the intensity of the moment becomes the narrative for the bigger picture. But for you, it seems like you can always zoom out and detach and see where you're trying to get to long term. So what allows you in the heat of the moment to detach from it a little bit and to see the bigger picture? You mentioned as your childhood, you were around intensity a lot, so you got used to being around intensity, but it seems like this ability to have a wider perspective and to see this as part of the path has been strong for you. So how have you been able to develop that? Or has this been a natural trait of yours?
No, it's just like anything, it really had to develop like over time. And I guess let's go through another mushroom experience that I had on the beach in Miami. So this time I was just like having a good time, and the thing that came to me was that my life was three parts of like a whole, let's say three different shells. That phase one of my life was me as a poker player. Phase two of my life was me as a businessman, and phase three of my life is me, let's say, charity man or giving back. Like, so everything that I do, every part of this like intense experience, it's like you really said, it's like towards climbing that mountain that's in the background, that even though, you know, others might not see it or imagine that it's there and only see what's like in your present right now. It's like everything in my present, the way that I see it, is part of that like future of the way that I see it. And it's like that road that I'm on that I asked for. So, what's, I guess, since I've had crazy dreams before, the way, really my dream is to run the biggest charity in the world, and one that's like really a version of a charity that has, probably people that are poker minded towards like let's call it the board of that company, the ones who, let's say, hold resources and are tasked to do as much good as they possibly can with the resources that they hold. So, a lot of, unfortunately, the way charity exists now, like you guys know, I'm sure, is it's a lot of big corporations that pay a lot of people, and a lot of the money that is collected by them doesn't actually make it to the people that are in need and that need help. So I kind of see it as, okay, poker, that's like the first part, and I need to take the skill. So there's a reason that life put me as a poker player as that first part of the journey, to learn the skills and to translate those skills from poker to business to life, to then make it to, so then it was really another insanely humbling experience, of transitioning from myself as a poker player to a businessman, because there I am at the top of this mountain in poker. Now I jump into business. I have no idea about business. The only reason I really could even imagine doing it is that I'm just incredibly determined, and I don't look at things on paper and say, okay, well, what do I have today? And is it even possible that I could take what I have today into what I want? So, if we start like the journey of me creating For Poker, it wasn't called For Poker in the beginning, but so what wound up happening is in 2018, I meet with the guys at GG Poker, and my first interest was that I wanted to open a skin on their network. I thought that they had good software, and I thought that there was a big hole in the industry. I was telling people prior to that I thought it was very ripe to make a great poker product that you could challenge the people that were in the space. At that point, PokerStars really wasn't doing anything. It was kind of taking candy from a baby, scaling up like that GG offering from when I started. So I didn't open a skin because I would have needed to run customer support, payments, get a license. And at that time, I was, in my mind, one step away from #1 all time. And the only thing that I thought about was to be #1 all time. But what wound up happening from that is a few months later, they offered me just to be the face of the company. I accepted it, just thinking that I would get paid a decent amount of money to represent them. I liked their software. I liked what they were talking about, the way they thought about poker and growing it. Actually, in those early days, when I started, their biggest tournament was a $500 tournament with a 10K guarantee. I really, I architected their whole, maybe not low stakes offering, but any offering from $100 up. I architected really the whole schedule. I scaled the guarantees. I got the whole community to sign up. So I get to this point where I have, maybe it wasn't the biggest, but I'm pretty sure it was the biggest agency in the world. Like now I was just wound up I never thought of myself that I would become an agent, but I wound up becoming an agent for GG. I think I built it. There might be some guys who built something bigger than me, but it's with like a whole train of sub agents. So they might have built something that has 40 sub agents and there's 100 agents like in their scheme that maybe equals out to bigger than what I built myself. But I'm very sure that no one built something like as one agent the size of what I built. So at that time, I had a friend in Dubai who I thought knew a lot about software development, and he was seeing what I was doing with that. And he just said, wow, you need to build your own. So, the crazy person that I am, I'm like, oh yeah, how hard could that be? Even though I had some people telling me, you're crazy for like doing this, how hard it is crazy. So the way that it started was with this one friend, and he was going to hire a team of developers in India, and they were going to build me this game that I wanted. A year into that, I found out that this person that I thought was my friend was really just making up stories, pretending like he was putting X amount of time into the project. Like I would then connect with the team over there, and he just wasn't. So I wind up in this spot. I have to break free of him. I know nothing about business. I know nothing about technology. All I know is about poker. So I have to break through this person, but at the same time, I connect with someone else at a poker table who kind of has the same experience. Whereas if I would have not met this other person, I would have had to just shut down what I had because I had no idea how to build anything, how to manage a team. So I was able to actually bring this guy along, bring in he was actually closing down his business, and I brought him in and his company, and there were so many different points of, I wouldn't say highs and lows. It was like different points of lows and lows. It was like it went from low to lower to lower to lower to lower, where I'm like, this lunatic who's just carrying this thing on his back, has no idea like where he's going, doesn't have anywhere close to the necessary resources to like actually make it to a point that could build, that anyone could do anything or build something of like the level that you're imagining. So, because then it comes down to the other point. If you look on paper of what existed then, and you look on paper today of what exists today, you would say that it's impossible to get from A to B, or not A to, let's call it A to Z, because there were a whole different of letters that hit along like that road of different people and things that had to be shut down, moved out, fire this guy, like be, and then it's tough too, because you build these relationships with people in business also, and then next thing you know, you kind of have to like let them go. And before, you know, you were buddies hanging out, and now you're this young kid who's like letting go of people who have been in business for 20, 30 years. And that's another like tough thing on them. So it's like, if I would have looked at it on paper, I would have shut it down a million times all over. Somehow I made it to a point where I didn't have a single strong, I started at a point where I didn't have a single, like, let's say very strong poker developer that was on my team. And somehow I was able to make it to the point now where I would say if you did a survey of the best engineers that ever existed at PokerStars, I've got like 8 of the, let's not be too cocky, I've got at least 5 of the best like 10, maybe 8 of the best 10 that have ever been there. Fortunate, like all really came from the person who was the leader of that engineering team at the time, and him believing in the project and having just enough really pieces together that made it attractive enough for him, and then to bring the people in that he respected and also that respected him. So it's like all of these like impossible things happening that just somehow happen at these inflection points where it's like, okay, well, you know, I just have to believe, because there's nothing else that I could do, that the right person is going to walk through this door tomorrow, next week, next month, to be able to pick up the pieces that we have, rearrange them a bit, put them at a better point, and move it forward like to the next place. So it's been really a humbling experience, especially to go from, you know, I had in my mind, and I don't know why I would think this, but because I had this like crazy, like tumultuous journey up that mountain for poker, I was like, okay, you know, everything should be a bit more calm. It's like, you know, I thought too quick, kid. You know, I thought this was tough. Let's move you into like this place, because, you know, in your old place before, you know, if you were in a tough point, it was only you and yourself and as a poker player, and you didn't have all these hanging things like around. Now you start a business, you have 50 people, 100 people working for you. Every single one of those people rely on you, their families rely on you. So it's like then taking that same thing of the not give up mentality, not letting the things like drag you down, no matter like how tough the storm is, and just like keep moving forward when you can. And it's just, I think it's just a belief of our ability to make magic happen. But at the same time, we can't determine like when something's supposed to happen. We can imagine like a dream, set ourselves out on the path. The way that that's going to unfold, you have no way. So, and then I guess the other thing that I come back to is, you can think that things are difficult in a moment, but you have to also remember that you can only see a very small bit of the picture that's unfolding and the story that you're in. So the story that you're in, if you believe everything is for your greater good, these difficult times are actually necessary to get you forward. So like you actually, if you don't accept them, then why did you ask for this difficult thing like this difficult mountain to climb if you thought it was going to be, an easy one that you could sit down all along the way?
This is so powerful for anyone listening. And I think for yourself, like, it's so clear that you dream big and you set this dream as like the goal, destination to go for, and you just stay the course, you stay the path, and you don't know how it's going to unfold. And almost like the harder it gets, the more you're like, well, this is just toughening me up. You mentioned armoring up a few times of get me stronger. This is exactly what I need. I've got a question of, do you ever doubt the dream? Do you ever think, wait a second, maybe the dream I had, for some of the poker sites, maybe that was just a bit too far out. Maybe that wasn't the path for me, and I can keep going and not get there. Was there any doubt? Or do you ever have doubts with the big destinations that you set for yourself?
I think well, it's interesting because in the beginning, when I really didn't like map this out, I just went with the belief that it could happen and that it was possible. I couldn't have any doubt. I didn't have any understanding even of what it meant to run a business, to build like software. I was just like jumping straight in fresh as like a newcomer. Then also the other thing to like include in that is there are always going to be times that the idea, not even that you think that, but all these ideas always come up in your head. Some of them you grasp, some of them you don't, because some like you relate to, and some, are just like, that's not for me to think. But then if you really believe that everything happens for a reason, when you wind up in a situation where things are very tough, you have to just like surrender to what's supposed to be. So like life kind of not like makes you like ask for mercy almost. But so where I was going with that was like, you have to get to the place like that you surrender really. So things are so tough, like you have to just surrender with like what is. So there were definitely points through it where it was like, well, since you have to, you accept everything that is, if this doesn't work, then it's not meant to work. And even though that you saw it and you felt it and believed it, it's maybe you were wrong this time. And it's like, okay, well, I guess that's another humbling part of like life. Maybe, it's not always like that, what you see, you can actually create. And, maybe you have to accept that some is bigger than you or wasn't necessarily meant to be there at like the time. So it's like a mix of belief, because then it's weird too, because it's like the belief and the surrender is almost opposite, but almost intertwined completely.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And I think people often struggle with the word surrender because it seems passive, or even acceptance because it seems like it's passive. But I think for yourself, it's very obvious that you're surrendering the how it's going to happen, you're surrendering when it's going to happen, you're surrendering the destination of how it's going to unfold. But the vision, the belief is right there. So you're surrendering the path. You're like, life, take me away. I'm going to go whatever way. I think you're taking me there. I think that's the destination. Maybe you've got a different path and we end up somewhere else, but I surrender it all. And at the same time, it's also you show up daily. I think as well, this is another part where people miss the part of the equation where surrender doesn't mean you just leave everything to chance. You've got to show up in the melting pot every day and put the work in that's needed to just that next step. As you mentioned, you don't even know what it is sometimes, but being in the fire of the moment and just trying to move forward, trying to move the situation forward. And this brings me to another skill of yours, which we haven't went into yet, the skill of being present. And I think in these scenarios, especially when the sky has fallen, so to speak, it's very hard to be present because life pulls on you. There's lots of emergencies. I think poker players listening, on a downswing, you're losing a large part of your roll. You want to stay present in the moment, but life is kind of compounded on you a little bit. So for you, I'm curious to know how you stay present in the moment when life is unfolding in a way that's not to your liking, let's call it, not in a bad way. So let's say you're on one of your massive swings or building the poker site, and you then have to be present at a super high roller tournament, but there's things generally on your mind or situations unfold on you. How do you be present when life is chaotic?
Well, I think one thing too that's interesting is sometimes, if you hold yourself to this, like, this, that you're supposed to be present and at your best all the time, you're guaranteed to fail. I think sometimes along that journey, you know, you're going to wake up in days where you have really nothing. You have no energy. You have really no ability to do anything at that time. And it's just like surviving is what you need to do. So it's like sometimes, like when you're going through the mud, you really just have to survive. Sometimes try to grasp as any type of fun or laughter that you can bring into it, but also just like accept that it's going to be draining sometimes. And sometimes you're not going to want to get out of bed, and you don't have to say, you know, I have to be my best every day, because you can't be your best every day. But at the same time, I think, call on myself to rise to the moment that we're in, which means like, yeah, just no matter what, like you're given, you just do the best that you can, like in that time, you just get through it. Sometimes really well, sometimes, you know, you might have to be dragged through the floor just to get through it. And it's like that humbling experience of it all too, is where it's like, if you think, you know, it's going to go this certain way, it's just not. You know, life will probably even like laugh at you just because you think it's going to go this certain way. It's going to push you somewhere else just to, okay, yeah, you know, you thought you knew, but sorry, kid. And then I think that it's just like, I get to the place that we're like, this is the one, whatever else that exists, you know, after life, pre-life, like the one thing that we know is that we're in this life right now, and the opportunity that we have is right here. And that's all that's really for sure. Anything else, you know, unless if you see it, feel it, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but this is what you have. So it's like, I think that same part of using your power in your favor instead of, and it's like power, it's words. You know, if you're using words to talk bad about yourself, to be negative, it's really just going to drain you. And at the same time, if you have people around you that are being negative, like it's going to be very hard to step up to the next level, because unfortunately, a lot of those people are trying to drag you down with them and make you feel the way that they feel. So it's, I don't know if tough is the right word. It's extreme because, you know, like many people say, the road to the top is a lonely one. And, you know, I think that that's true because, especially in this time, people like to use crutches or medications or something that's going to fix them instead of working on fixing themselves. So if you're really dedicated to this life of growth, because, you know, when we say, you know, going the ladder, for me, the ladder has nothing to do with how much money you have. The ladder is of personal growth. And, you know, you can highlight a place like Bali. You go to Bali, there's tons of people who are happy and smiling, and you would look at them in another context and say that, you know, that they're poor and have nothing. But then I would ask, you know, who has nothing? The person who's happy with nothing, or the person who's miserable with everything? And, you know, not too many people really reflect on the important things of life, and of like what makes you happy in life. You know, so many people take that happiness out of the equation, and they'll even use those external things like, oh, I'll be happy when I have a certain amount of money, when I own a certain house, when I have a certain car. But that's just like something set to fail. Like you're guaranteed to fail, because everything you're doing now is contributing to unhappiness. It's driving people away from you. It's not having real substance in your life. And it's like one of these people that I really like, he says, if you're content with food, shelter, and companionship, you tread lightly on this world and quickly get to a place that you want to give something in return. And I think for, you know, people, and that's like another part of, you know, people see me, they see, you know, that I've eaten at expensive restaurants, stayed at 5-star hotels, like lived on private, or like not lived, but flown on like private jet, lived like a extravagant lifestyle. But at the same time, you know, I can be very happy with, the happiest that I am is when I'm just with people that I like, laughing. I don't, you know, and it's like that truth of the food, shelter, companionship. And you look at a person like people in Bali, those are the important things to them: food, shelter, and companionship. You know, maybe their shelter is not the way, not what you want, but they have people to share it with, like, and love all around them. And it's like in this fast-paced Western life, everyone's looking for a quick fix and thinking that they can almost buy anything, where, you know, it's like, what is like the best things in life are free, which really couldn't be more true. You know, the material things that you have, they mean nothing to you if you don't have anyone to share them with. You see the most unhappy people with the most things. And that, you know, what have those people been focused on? They've been focused on attaining things to bring happiness. And it's almost a guaranteed failure. You know, bring happiness to bring happiness. You know, what can you do to smile in the morning? You know, what can, who are the people that inspire you to be better? Who are the people that you feel great when you're around them? Like, and we spend so little time thinking of these most important things that really exist in our existence, and we're just all pulled towards, it's like the consumerism life. We're all pulled towards these shiny things that have no substance.
Yeah, and it's like we lose track of the bigger game. And the bigger game is always to be happy. It's always some form of living in the moment, experiencing joy. And we get sold on the illusion or the fantasy that we need to do stuff to get to a point, and then we'll enjoy the happiness after. It's almost like I need to earn my happiness. I need to battle, get my kind of armor, my stripes, my success, my accolades, and then I'll be happy because I've earned my happiness, not thinking that happiness needs to be the starting point. Now, I'm really curious to know when this shift happened for you, because I'm imagining someone very ambitious, working really hard, almost obsessed with poker, trying to climb the mountain to be the #1 earner in the history of poker. And it seems like at some point, I'm not sure when it was, on this journey, you had an infraction point or a new way of thinking about life in maybe more holistic way, where the bigger picture started to become more and more important. So can you picture when that time was for you, and what changed when you started to think about maybe your overall happiness, your overall lifestyle, rather than just having success in poker?
Okay, so it was the summer of 2018. So in 2007, so we touched before on like that difficult time I went through in 2016. We didn't really touch that in 2017, after that tournament that I was in Manila for Triton. I had the biggest winning year of anyone in the world in 2017. I cashed for like 8.5 million and really didn't play many tournaments. I had my biggest cash then. I won 100K in Monaco for 3 million or something there, and just really did well that whole year. But that mostly just got me out of the hole that I was in. So then towards the middle of 2018, I just got like even with the person who that was the business deal with. And as soon as I could, I said, you know, I'm done with you. I want nothing to do with you ever again. I got away from that person, shifted into getting a new staking deal with someone else, someone who actually had no interest in staking, but they were playing a lot at the time and said that they thought that I was the best in the world. So there was no way that they couldn't stake me in their mind. Then in 2018, I was having a losing year. And it comes to the summertime of 2018. And I met my now girlfriend then, and so I actually I was in Vegas at that time, but I planned that I was going to leave Vegas and go do something else. But we just connected, and we were hanging out every day, eating lots of mushrooms. And, you know, that's when I started to shift. But at the same time, I was very sure about what I was sure about, because through my experience, like what worked for me, like was like in my perspective worked so far. So to get me to even pull out of that, I would say that she is very patient and I don't think that there are many people that could have actually I don't think that there are many people in the world that have like the skill set and composure that could actually help me navigate where I was to where I am right now, and started little by little making me more aware of breathing and what I was eating and getting some exercise like throughout my day. And, you know, hey, this is the way that people see you because you said things like this. Is this how you want to actually be? It's like, oh, man, like whole like so and then it's like the whole other thing. So this experience, not that it was like ego wipe, but at the same time, when you reach like this high point of yourself and you're so sure of these things, it's hard as especially the first time, it's hard to just, you know, wipe that away and say, okay, well, let's take this still exists, but let's, you know, what exists here, let's put the pieces down and try to recreate it like back to the person that I want to be. It's a whole like I would say that was like the beginning of like that hero's journey and dropping of like the ego that I created, that I believe was probably necessary for me as a poker player, but not necessary for me as a person. Whereas like in my poker experience, if I didn't have that complete confidence playing at the highest level, pretty much myself against all these other groups, I don't think that I could have reached the top. But then at the same time, as you then transition to a different phase or person of yourself, you know, maybe what was serving you before isn't necessarily serving you in the way that you want to be or be seen like by others. So I think that, and it's interesting too that you said hero's journey. And one of my good friends, that's how she described my last year. Said, you know, you have all this power, you know, you were on this track that was very intense, you know, it could have went. And I think when she met me, she's a very gifted person. She said that when she met me, she was actually scared because she saw the amount of like power and intensity that I had and saw that it could go in either direction. Let's say me as a tyrant or me as like a healer, the one that I really want to be and like relate to. It's like someone who helps others. So it's like this ego and this idea of myself had to really be wiped through the floor. And that's like it's like that synchronicity. When you said it, I'm like, you know, it must be true. You know, where does he come up with like hero's journey, that she's the only one that said it to me? And I'm like, okay, well, you know, you've got this you have this other, you know, close friend who's a numerologist, and when she gave you the report of 2023, she says this was your year of intense growth. So it's like, okay, well, so, you know, whatever, all of this, you know, intensity that, you know, you might not ask for, that's what's in your cards, your stars, like for whatever reason. So it's like, you know, do you want to accept that or do you want to fight it? And if you fight it, you know, you can't change, grow with the times, and you'll be stuck as the way that you were. So it's like, I see myself like always, even the tough thing, I guess, is when you're on like that thing of growth, you'll listen to a conversation, a podcast that you had a few months ago, and you're like, who is that person? You know, why did they say this? Like, what are you talking? You're like embarrassed for yourself. It's like a lot of times I actually don't like watch them. I think this is a very good one. I think this might be the first time or one of the first times that I could look at it maybe in 6 months and say, okay, you know, you're speaking well, you know, clear, you know, you said what you wanted to say. And I think that's all like the growth of it too. It's all a humbling experience, you know. And then it's also difficult because since a lot of people, or I mean, I don't think that there are many people in the world that are in like this intense growth cooker that I've kind of been in. So they couldn't understand this experience because it's like it's not for them, or it's like it's not the path that they've been on like for life. So you kind of have to accept that, you know, what you have is unique to you, and all that you can do is keep trusting like your instinct that's been working for you so far, and, you know, keep like giving the best that you possibly can. And even though these things are tough to navigate through, they were there for you, and they're there for you for a reason. And try
Yeah.
to take it with a smile. I couldn't say that I'm, you know, I'll be completely honest, because that's what I like. I don't want to give anything else and say that, even when you make it to like a high place of yourself, your yourself is still just going to be destroyed in this like place of growth. So it's like, I feel like these last 2 years have been, or like, I would say 2.5 years for me have been like the toughest, most intense, like, time of my life. But then you could actually look at it in another way, where if you then say, okay, well, all of the huge transformation that I've had was in these most difficult times of my life, I must be on the right track if I'm now in the most intense time of my life.
Yeah, so much to dive into there. It's almost like life's leading to growth, and all the challenges you go through leads you to grow. You mentioned also almost like the death of the ego and like being reborn in different parts of yourself. And I think it's when you're on the growth path and like a fast growth path, as you mentioned, you can look back on yourself months ago, like half a year ago, and be like, who is this? Who is this guy? What was he doing? And that's a good sign. That's a good sign you're moving forward. And I think people struggle with that because they create such a fixed identity, such a strong narrative. They'll say something 2 years ago and they want to stay consistent with that over and over. And the people around them often expect them to stay consistent as well, which stunts their growth.
That's a perfect point right there. And that's like the even more difficult thing about it, because like, as a lot of people exist like in a confined box, they see you as you were, not as you are. So even though you're going through this like intense growth, people are going to see you as your old self, and almost life is going to try to drag you back to your old self. It's just like that belief that you're on like the right track of whatever noise that you listen to, like in the sky, or whatever, tells you the way that you are. Because it's like that, if you don't have that insane confidence in yourself, I think in the world that we live in, you're going to be dragged down at some point when you climb like on that mountain. So it's like you have to harbor, that's why life wouldn't give it to you unless if you have like learned and harbored these skills that you need for that journey. It's like, life wouldn't be so cruel to put you on a mountain that you couldn't actually climb. You might not like how you're going to climb there, but if life gives you it, that means that you can handle it.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to just quickly piece together that kind of period of your career and your kind of growth. So you mentioned that kind of summer 2018 was very, very pivotal, and you started to look at your lifestyle more, breathing, diet, everything around your overall, how you felt about yourself. And then I think 2019 was, I think it's still one of the best years, if not the best year ever in terms of profits in poker.
No one will ever beat that year. I think it's almost impossible, because it has like the 20 mil cash that'll probably never happen again. And then even if that happens again, someone would have to win that tournament and cash for over 10 million apart from that tournament in the year.
Yeah.
So it's like, they say that no records are unbroken, but unless if they start with bigger buy-ins than $1 million buy-in regularly, this is going to be an impossible one really for anyone to beat. But yeah, since it like jumped ahead, I'll give a bit of that story then too, because okay, so I have an amazing time like that summer. Like I'd say my mind like opens a lot more, but throughout the rest of that year, I couldn't win. It was, I'm pretty sure it was the only losing year that I ever had in my career. So now I have this new stake deal with someone, and I was in, well, the buy-ins were so big. So I was in 3.5 million in makeup, but I was playing 250K buy-ins, like 100K rebuy tournaments. So it's not really out of the norm to get in like that much makeup. So at the end of that year, actually, the person who was staking me says like, hey, I think the number is too big. I'm willing to just like wipe it clean and start from zero again. But in like that integrity that I have myself, one thing that I always said, and that's how, like, life's interesting how it tests you. So one thing that I always said that was that I would never intentionally make a bad deal for anyone. So as soon as he's saying these words to me, that's what's ringing in my head. Like, wait, if you like accept this thing, that means that this deal was horrible, because if adversity happens, you accept like that it's too big for you. And, it's also someone who had a ton of money. So, you could easily be sitting in my shoes like, oh, this 3.5 million means nothing to this person. Like, and it means a whole lot to me. I'm like, no, what matters to me is the deals that I make and the word that like I give. And when we made a deal for a high stakes, like stake, there was nothing in there that if it hits negative 3.5, you're going to like just call it even. So I said to them, don't worry, I'm going to be number one in the world again next year. And then just somehow that's exactly what happened.
Wow. Yeah, and that's amazing. And as you mentioned a few times, integrity being one of your core values and core character traits that allows you to make these decisions. And I'm curious to know, like, during this point, so you were 3.5 million in makeup and you're still playing these really super high rollers. Did you have a kind of limit in your own mind, like how deep you could go before it affected you mentally? Do you feel calm through this process? And yeah, tell me for like how you were managing that.
I would say I was really calm just because I was having fun in life still. I was having like some type of balance. And even in 2019, it's not like I was hammering every tournament. I was playing tournaments that I wanted to play. So it's like start of the year Aussie Millions. I loved going there. So it was just like I was having fun. I remember, I was along like I don't know if you guys have ever been like there at the casino, but there's a nice like river and walkway. I was just hanging out and walking that every day, eating healthy. I was smiling. I was in the most negative that I've ever been in my life, but I was happy. And it actually, because the person who was taking me, since I was in like that spot, they would loan me like some life money too. So I was in a spot still that I could still do the same things that made me happy and didn't need, money to validate like who I was. So I was able to, win lots, keep none of the money, but be very positive forward in like the direction that I was going in. And I really had no doubts like that year. I guess I was so sure that I was going to be number one in the world again, like somehow, even though I'm at the end of my first losing year ever. I'm in the most negative that I've ever been in. I owed another, I think 500,000 on the side, which means since like you're staked at 50-50, you need 1 million to cover that. So I needed to win like 4.5 million just before, actually, no, I owed 1 million on the side at that point, half and then another half. I was at a point where I needed to win 5.5 million just to get even. So that's like another well, actually, so we fast forward. So when I was in that London thing, the thing that when I was in like that last experience in 2016 in London, to get out of that room, like staying confident, the thing that I accepted is that it might take me 3 years just to get my head above water. But the thing is, whatever, you just start climbing and do like what you can. And somehow, as reality has it, I wound up in negative again. But 9 months later, I was at from this point that seemed like it would have been a good 3 years to get out, and I got out in 9 months, and then was able to, pull myself out of it again. And I think that balance and laughter and value for things other than at the poker table allowed me to have fun and enough calmness and creativity to have like that massive year in 2019.
I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. Quick reminder, Mechanics of Poker 2.0 coaching program is currently open for enrollment, and we've put together the biggest promotion ever. 25% off on the program and 3 bonuses worth close to 3,000 euros of free value. Enrollment is open for the first couple of weeks of January before we close the program permanently. So don't miss out. Go over to mechanicsofpoker.com, sign up now, and let me and Adam help you achieve your poker goals in 2024.
Yeah, I think this would be a great time to go deeper into how you think about risk. So there's almost like 2 sides of this. One, some people be listening going, wow, Bryn is so reckless. He was willing to lose it all, and then he got lucky, spun it up, and works out nice. But he could have easily went 10 mil in the hole, and his backer and himself was in a bad situation. But for you, it feels like, obviously, during this point, you've already built a tolerance for swinging millions. So you're used to that, kept those money. That doesn't scare you. It just feels normal. You're playing super high rollers, so it's in buy-ins, it's not crazy amounts. But I'm wondering how you think about risk to reward. I know as poker players, we're constantly, even every pot you're in, there's a risk to reward calculation going on. How do you think about, so for you, we've got the dream of being the number 1 player in the world, but the negative side of that, the risk is I go 10 million, 20 million into a hole and I can never get out of it. So how do you navigate risk and think about the risk to reward? Or do you just have so much confidence over the long term that you're not really overly concerned? Yeah, I'm curious to know how you think about.
I think it's that last one, that I have so much confidence in the long term, but also that I relate it to like that mountain that's in the future that's always present but not present, let's say. Because okay, so if my goal is to do good in the world, you know, let's in the early days of myself, that was, I'd say, the mindset. My goal is to build something that I could do good in the world with. So for me, it was like, okay, you have $1 million. What are you going to do with $1 million? You can't do anything. You might as well gamble it and try to build up like something bigger. And I've actually seen some poker players talk about it. I think it was Pads who talked about how you should take lots of risk, like as you're younger, because the value of if things go well is so exponentially higher than taking risk like in later stages when things are more like developed. So I think I just innately had like that mindset that because I had this skill in poker, and for me it was always that I could always win it back. I've always won it back. I consistently won in poker. Even when I got into these holes, it wasn't from me playing poker. It was from me staking people, me doing a bad business deal, me spending too much money in life. Like the norm was that I consistently won. So having that like supreme confidence that even no matter where I find myself in, I can pull myself out of it. And then at the same time, you know, because you have these goals that need much more resources than the ones that you have, it makes sense to gamble heavily with the ones that you have to try to reach the ones that you need.
Is
So
your
I think it's even like to be honest, I think it's really a selflessness too. And it comes almost to the detriment sometimes, I think, of like my girlfriend, unfortunately, because it's like having it's going to be, from anyone who hasn't had this experience, it's a super intense one. And it really, you're willing to risk everything like for this greater belief, where most people are so risk tolerant that they're not really, they couldn't imagine like risking everything. So it's like, then it comes, that's even like the higher levels I think that you reach in life, the more intricacies that come with them, and the more that life almost demands a higher level of yourself at all times to be able to navigate through like those rough seas.
So you said you're willing to risk everything for the belief that you have in that future, that mountain that's in the background. And you mentioned also Pad saying that when you're young, taking lots of risk is exponentially worth it because the compounding effects when risks pay off. Is there a point where when you're navigating life, you want to almost recalibrate a bit of your risk tolerance? So if we look at you right now, if you're always willing to put it all on the line, is like the not like an inevitable 30 million down that knocks you from your next point? Or do you feel like you don't really care about ever losing everything because you can make it back? So do you feel like for yourself, for your own growth, has there been a recalibration of how you take on risk? Are you still willing to risk it all for the dream if the dream's strong?
I think that's like that's like the part that life asked me, I think, in this last bit. Are you still willing to risk everything for what you believe? And I would have to say that I stood up and said, yeah, bring it, give me it. So, yeah, somehow I would say, because it's just like, okay, so it's very different though. So I would say for anyone listening, you have to, you can't think of things the same way that I think of things, because I have a special like talent and special gift. I think if they ran like a competition in the world of people starting with $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000, and who over like the long run comes out like with the most bankroll at the end of the year, I think I'd be in the top 0.0001% of the world. So I have this skill that I can turn very little and spin it into something big. With like, there's always poker games everywhere. I clearly have like the poker skill to win. I've won in every version of poker. I've won in heads up, in PLO, in 8-game, in tournaments, sit and goes, cash games, every single version of live poker, online poker. I've never really got lessons from anyone in any game. When I started playing PLO, I just, hopped in and played the first hands of PLO myself. Never even watched any training videos. I've just whatever skills that I have, I think that they're perfectly suited for poker. So since I have like this ability, that's very rare, I would say, to spin up nothing into something, I can take these risks that I do. Whereas the same time, if I was giving advice to someone else, I would definitely tell them that they should not take like risks to the same extreme level as me, because the value that you always have is the resources that you have. And for most people in the world, it takes a lot of time to grow and scale these resources. And if you lose them, it's very hard to come back from nothing. Poker's like a rare industry that you could do it, that stakes exist, that people are willing to stake you. There aren't many things in the world that you can like go to zero and build something back up again. So it's like use extreme caution with this, and please don't try this at home. It's not I'm sure that it's not for you. Maybe there's a person that's listening that this is for them, and they say, exactly the way that I feel is the way that they relate to life, and they want to give everything that they can to be a better person, to help as many people as they possibly can. Then I would say, put it all on the line. But that's also not a comfortable ride. Accept that that's a crazy one. Accept that life's going to give you it. It's like that saying, be careful what you wish for, because that's how I see it too. Be careful what you wish for, because that's what's coming. And it's like, are you sure that you even want what you wish for? And that's where a lot of people kind of miss the boat, because they think that they want something, but they actually haven't done the thinking of what that means for their life. Because like everything has positive and negative, it's the yin and the yang of something. So you could say, okay, I want this thing because what I gain from this is so big. But did you think about what you lose from it? Maybe it's time, maybe it's relationships. Like there's so much into like that picture. And that's why it's like, unless if you're trying to do something, unless if you like self-analyze and are always willing to like go back to the drawing board, life's like gonna eat you alive.
Yeah, very interesting. And as you mentioned, the tolerance for risk is very unique to you, and maybe some people relate to that. But I think what is a common thread throughout this conversation is going after the dream and climbing the mountain, your own mountain. Now, you set the mountain super high. You were like Mount Everest, top peak. Other people have the smaller mountains that are trying to climb, but we're all on our own journey, trying to level up ourselves to get to our destination. Now, what I thought was really interesting is how you spoke about kind of what's going to make you happy on that journey, where you're trying to get to. And most people kind of don't know. And I've had hundreds of conversations with poker players, and it's been quite surprising for me as I've gone into coaching to realize how many people don't know where they want to be in life. They haven't chosen their path, and they haven't got that clarity. They say they want more money, they say they want a nice financial, they want more freedom. If you give them freedom, they wouldn't know what to do with it, and they haven't mapped out this vision of where they want to go, what life's about. And I always feel like life's a game where we can be anyone we want, character-wise. We can achieve almost anything we want, and we've just got to choose. We've got to choose and stay the course. And it's just very interesting how many people don't choose. For you, I'm not sure if it was a conscious process. It sounds like you have drives internally, things come to you, ideas, thoughts, and it feels strong, and you go with that, and that's just the path to go. Other people have to sit down and actually map out, like kind of think through their thoughts, journal, go on retreats, do things to actually get some clarity. But the main thing is like going with that kind of vision and having it strong enough that it drives everything else that's going around you. Even when things are pulling on you, whether it's people, whether it's situations, you've got that strong path. Now, I want to circle back around before I forget to what allows you to be successful in every game of poker you play, every format. Just jump in. So I'm trying to think, what's the common trend or the common themes or traits that allow you to be a big winner? You mentioned you've got skills that are just tailor-made for poker. So I'm curious to know what allows you with confidence to jump into a new game, a new format, online, live, high roller, whatever, and be a winner. What allows that to happen?
I guess it was always like fun for me is the thing. So like magic almost shaped the way into thinking about poker like a competition, and the chips being play chips, and you're just trying to like accumulate chips however you can. So, you're okay then losing chips, you're okay learning. I think the thing that enables me, I believe, to be super successful at it is the willingness to be completely open-minded and not write off anything. So, of course, like when you jump into a game for the first time, and you said a bit of this, you know, what will you do? You're going to look at the other people who are winning in this game, and you're going to try to incorporate some of the moves and thinking that they do inside your own game. So without even realizing it, you know, you might be playing a certain game, like, you know, you start out playing mixed, let's say, and 5 years later, you're still playing mixed. You don't consciously realize it, but part of your game is from so many different people and things that they did. So, you know, one move that you make, you don't realize that, you know, maybe you saw John Hennigan do it 5 years ago and you were like, oh, this move is like sick and I'm going to bring this into my game. And 5 years later, you know, you wind up in a similar spot like that. And I think it's kind of similar with life too, where, what is it? Another one of the things in life is you become like a mix of the 5 people that you're closest to. So I see it all, like I see us as energy. So like the me that's here right now, I feel like is all of these different pieces of different people that have like touched my life in different ways, of like their way of thinking, their way of being, the way that something that maybe they taught me, something that they allowed me to realize in myself. So it's like some of the words that I say even aren't my words. They're someone else's words that resonate with me. So it's like I think that the thing that I'm very good at is um being confident but being open-minded, which, okay, so the way that I see it is, personally I believe that if you're not open-minded, that you're not in my terms of intelligent. You know, you might be intelligent on like paper, you might be able to whiz like a test or something, but if you're unwilling to change like the way that you're thinking and the way that you're being, you know, it's in that, like, you know, you're going to get swept away with the times. So since I was always confident, but also so willing to reevaluate my thought process and my way of playing, it allowed like this massive creativity that maybe didn't exist for others because they lived in a certain parameter that, you know, this play is either right or wrong, like it's all on paper, the other variables like don't exist. But for me, it's like all of these other personally, all these other variables do exist. Everything's always interchanging. It's all based on completely different scenarios that you might even see 2 scenarios that I see completely different as, you know, those 2 look like very similar, but I would have a reasoning for why I see them as completely different scenarios. And I think like that open-mindedness has really been the thing that's like propelled me to the top of any game, and willingness to like learn from others. So even if, you know, I'm playing, let's say, for instance, you're playing with people in high rollers, you know, some of the things you don't agree with, but the thing is, they're also very good, very smart people. So if you then say like, okay, you know, I'm just the best and I'm the best, you have no chance like of actually being the best or staying the best. Maybe you're at the top of the mountain for a small bit, but unless if you're taking parts of the things that other people are learned and things that work for them. So, you know, I think a lot of times, okay, so there are some people in poker that have won for 15 years or something, that a lot of other winning players would say, you know, this guy is bad. I would look at it completely different. It's like, what do you mean this guy is bad? He's been winning consistently. He must be doing multiple things right. Yeah, you might be looking at things in a vacuum and saying this is bad. Maybe it even is bad in his game because everyone has leaks. And I think that I'm good at figuring out where their weaknesses lie and how to exploit those. But at the same time, you need to look at other successful people, see what they're doing, and put it into your own thinking. So, you know, you know, you might, this person, maybe you look at 20 different things that they're thinking that they do, and maybe you think 19 of them are right or wrong, but maybe there's a genius in one of them. And if you discredit that person's skill or ability, then you also discredit that one genius that you can accumulate to your own game. So that open-mindedness, if you don't have, will be your demise. And then it's like also, you know, if someone is closed-minded, they play a fixed certain game. My game is, okay, I'm gonna think about how you play, and I'm gonna build a strategy that's good against your strategy. And then, you know, I thought about poker so much. I think in the times where I was playing my best, the way that I would think about it is, okay, what's the best strategy against my own strategy? Because, you know, you have to like, in that forward thinking, you have to think ahead of, okay, how can someone combat this? And is there a way that if they figure this out, that they're going to be able to exploit you in all these different ways? And I think one of the first eureka moments I had was like, okay, the best strategy against my strategy is to keep pots small and stay away. And the people who don't do that wind up in the blender, and you're going to wind up in tough spots over and over again. And if you keep going after the other toughest people in the jungle, you're going to get cut and bit sometimes. But if you can navigate through, see, I respect this guy over here, sometimes you're going to wind up in a pot with him, but you're also not going to go out of your way to try to be in a pot with a person who's like on this level. And that's like the ego that I feel like gets a lot of people too. And probably because, so like, what that said to me in that time of like not competing, what I got from that is that there were probably a lot of people that I competed against that felt like that they were competing against me. And that was like an extra layer that made them unable to compete against me, because it's almost like I'm clear in that space. They're like congested because they're thinking, oh, okay, they have to get past me. I'm just like, no, I just have to like make the right decision, get past myself. So it's like, then, you're navigating the river becomes all that harder.
Yeah, I think going into this conversation, some myself included, might wonder like how you got to the very top of the game without studying, like generic studying, so to speak. But like, listening to you speak, it's so clear how you learn and how you grow as a person. And you mentioned like being open-minded. And so I'm picturing you go into a new format and learning from imitation. You mentioned as well, like kind of mimicking people. If you look at our childhoods, like before 6 years old, we literally pick up language, you pick up skills, you pick up motor skills, you pick up how to walk, talk, just by watching. You literally no one gives us a book to read. We just watch people, we learn stuff. So we learn through imitation. And you mentioned like absorbing information, and you talk about like energy getting absorbed. So imagining you be like an open vacuum, absorbing all the information around you, mimicking things that are good that you think that could be working, but also radically open-minded to what could be explored, where other people might fix themselves off strategy-wise. You're just this creative bundle of energy. You're absorbing all the good points, then you almost got your own ingredients to mix around, and you allow yourself to be creative. You mentioned at the start of the conversation, actually, which I wrote down, our creativity gets stolen from us often by society, by people. And it feels like for you, you've never allowed your creativity to be stolen. You've always allowed yourself to come up with your own strategies, come up with what works for you. So yeah, really, really intriguing. And yeah, I think it shows how your mind works, but also how you're able to be a good winner in every game, because like success leaves clues, and you've been a long winner for a long time in all games you've played for such a sample size that it's impossible to say it's been anything other than a skill. So I think for the audience listening, understanding that, yeah, this open-mindedness, I think that's the thing as well, where it's easy to talk about being open-minded, but we often have fixed views on something. For example, I like being right. I like my viewpoints being, I'm good at this. If I've got to open my mind up, I've got to go, I could be wrong. That what I just did there could be awful. What this guy did there, which I class as bad, could have actually max exploited me, and I could be the idiot, not him. Oh, that feels uncomfortable. I don't like sitting with that. Maybe I should label him an idiot, and I'm the genius. I'm the genius, he's the idiot. Perfect. All right, back to my cave, and life goes on. So I think we can talk about that, but it's harder to do in practice. So yeah, hopefully for anyone listening, it's been refreshing to hear what it's like to be open-minded, and to try on different viewpoints and perspectives as well. All right, I want to bring in Rene now, because I know Rene's been waiting patiently. It's normally me waiting patiently on the sidelines, but we went deep into your mind, how you think about poker, how you think about life, your whole holistic philosophies. And I know Rene is very keen to go into how you think about strategy and how you've improved your technical game. So I'll pass it over to you, Rene.
Yeah, I mean, you already actually touched on a topic that I actually was very curious in diving into, because he also mentioned it. Like, you won in every format of poker, and this is also something that Adam already touched on. And I was curious, like, from a technical perspective, what are like some concepts that all poker games / formats have in common that you need to understand in order to be successful in all these games? Like, there's some underlying mechanics in all games of poker that, that translate well into all the games. Could you maybe think of a couple?
Yeah, well, like first, so I got one amazing piece of advice, or especially for like the way that I like to play poker. When I was 20 years old, I met this guy who was a big winner at the time, playing 25-50 on like Stars, like maybe in the same days as you, maybe a bit before. He was Monkey 101 on Stars, like back in like maybe 2006. He was like the #1 winner on there. Yeah, I think that sounds like 2006, 2007. And I was hanging out with him on one trip at Commerce Casino. I was 20 or 21 years old. And he kind of opened my mind of saying that his whole approach is based on like what the other person has. So it was like my mind exploded. Like at the time I was playing this game that was, focused on what I had. And I'm like, what do you, I'm like, oh, okay, it's like it all just like got wiped out right there. It's like, okay, so this game is actually focused on what your opponent has, how to exploit them the most, and how to navigate like through this sea the most. So, and then I think it's a lot of taking some type of mechanics that you learned from a different type of game. So like, for example, when I jumped into heads up PLO, I'd played heads up no limit before. So some of like the mechanics of heads up poker are similar, even though the game is completely different, the way you think about it and the way that you approach it. So now it's like you take those pieces that you have that apply to this while at the same time being willing to like open your mindset and thinking of how heads up in this game is different than the other game. So it's like taking the skills that you have, translating some of them, and also just being okay with being a beginner at something, and just being willing to pay the price that it costs to go from beginner to the next phase, which I would say then just went to business. Like, even though it's not on the topic, it's like then the same thing, in any type of mountain. It's like, can you go from like expert, maybe not expert, but someone with an high advanced something, to then going to like a next thing, accepting that you're a beginner and then paying the price to become something bigger. So it's like when I went into business, I was a beginner. You have to pay the price to graduate from beginner to anything else. Would many people have jumped into business the way that I did? Almost certainly not. But I was since my whole like experience, my whole thing is experience, and I learn through experience. I'm not going to learn it through a book. I'm going to learn it like in experience and how it works for me. So it's like I have to pay the price to be the fish in the beginning, to then be able to level up to the point where, you go from the fish to holding your own to now maybe mastering like what field that you're in, and being okay with being the fish, I think, is a necessary trait in those. Because if you think that you're going to go into any of these games and be like, okay, I'm great at Omaha, so of course I'm going to be great at, mixed games for some reason. What do you like? The two don't go in two together at all. But there are some things in poker that, concepts that you use and ways that you think about it. It's kind of like the same way where you'll see people who have no idea how to play mixed hop into like the 50K in the summer and make runs or even win the tournament, just knowing tournament strategy and when to push like the gas and when to hold off, like, which is interesting too as well. Someone like Mizraki, I think, is a perfect example, who won the Players Championship multiple times. I think if you asked other high stakes mixed game players how his mixed game is in a vacuum, they would probably say that he shouldn't be playing at the highest level with others. But then at the same time, because he has other skills that translate to success in that format, even without understanding that maybe some of even basic like understandings that these other experts are so deep into, he's able to, with his skills, like navigate that. And then others, will look at it and say, oh, he's lucky. Sure, maybe like luck exists sometimes, but when it's consistently happening in like regular-ish basis, I think he won the Players Championship twice. I think he final tabled it another 2 times in the past like 20 years. And this is a 5-day tournament that's so like deep and long, and you play so many hands of so many different games. So if you look at things like by a textbook, you say, oh, well, it doesn't make sense, which is then why you have to not judge. It's like, don't judge the book by its cover before you know what's inside. And
actually, that's very interesting what you touched on. Like, you could, let's say you play a tournament, and it doesn't really matter if it's PLO, mixed game, no limit hold'em, but indeed, like, reading the situation, like, oh, this guy is under quite a lot of pressure, I should apply some pressure here, or, oh, my stack at this moment is quite valuable, maybe I should sit it out. These like overlying principles that whatever game you play, they will apply in this tournament format. So if you're a good tournament player, You could probably play PLO, no limit, hold'em, mixed game. A lot of things will transition. I guess it's more difficult than when you play, or I guess if you're a cash game player, if you're a cash game player and you're used to playing deep stack, a lot of the deep stack concepts will translate if I play PLO or no limit hold'em. If we're deep, we're deep. Some concepts will apply, and if we're short, we're short. Some concepts will still apply.
Yeah, for sure.
But this aha moment actually that you said was, I think, was very interesting, where you said, like, oh, it's not about my own cards. I had actually a very similar aha moment twice, I think. I remember there was this girl called from Norway, Annette 15 or something, if I recall correctly, that she won a tournament without looking at her cards. That was like the story, right? It was like, what do you mean? What a tournament? But you need your cards, right? And I was like, huh. So then I remember I was playing like some multi-table sit and goes on full tilt back then. And I also started to understand, like, oh, these checks are stored. They cannot bust. Basically, I understood ICM. I didn't know what ICM was, but I was like, wait, but they're short. I can put pressure on them. And then I remember it's like, oh, I would put my hand like above my cards. And then next time, if this spot comes, I will just jam any two. And I would literally put my hands on my cards. I can apply pressure to you guys. You know, I had no clue what I had no clue about ICM, but I understood ICM in a certain way. I was like, I can put a lot of pressure here. And then sometimes I would just be jamming like Jack 3 offsuit from the hijack because just, I was just levering pressure. I didn't care about the cards,
Yeah, exactly.
So that's actually when you start to realize that, like, oh, wow, it's not about my own cards. I remember it was a very big breakthrough for me as well.
Yeah.
You did actually end up deciding on MTTs for, I guess, your most professional career. I don't know how much other games, but that's, I think, what you're most known for, and that's also what you're -- 1 in. What is it then about MTTs that makes no limit MTTs that makes it?
Well, actually, it was just like when I lost that, like, when I spun up the 50K to 3.5 million, it was all in cash games. I'd never played an MTT before then. Then when I like lost it all, I got to the point where I think when I lost it all at first, I might have been playing still like some 10, 20, 25, 50 when, let's say, I was at like 500K roll to like negative roll or so, and I kept trying to play cash a bit. I realized though that because I was playing such high stakes and such a high level that I couldn't really bring my presence into these cash games at a low level, and I was almost like pushed in the direction of, okay, well, the thing that you're negative 500 in the hole, you're not playing well at 510. What can you do to get yourself out of it? And MTTs just kind of like popped up.
And that started well. You were like, okay, but from like a strategical perspective, do they intrigue you more than, for example, the cash games?
I enjoyed it so much more. Then I started to see like MTTs like fun and cash games like a job. Like cash games for me seemed like clocking in at work had a lot of similar like aspects where like in MTTs there were so many different scenarios that kind of kept things fun for me always. So it was like I just had fun in them and kind of really just didn't look back.
Actually, I can relate to that. Like, I don't play much tournaments. I mainly play cash games, but I do say that if I hop on a tournament, especially live, you sit down and I'm just there to solve the puzzle. I get like all these new situations and scenarios that I'm not used to, and it really triggers the creativity and brings really back the fun. I can definitely relate to that. I'm curious, like we talked a bit about solvers, decisions. Like obviously for a solver to come up with the correct decision, quote, it needs like certain information, right? It needs to take things into consideration. Yeah, who's the in position player, out of position player, what's the SPR? Of course, what are the ranges? Because the ranges will make up the equities, which is, pretty important in poker, any game you play. I believe yourself, you're not so much into solvers, if I understood that correctly, but you obviously make great decisions. What information do you find is most important to look for and to process in order to make the correct decisions? I kind of want to know what variables do go in the mind of the Bryn Kenney solver, that you need to take in consideration in order to make a good decision.
Okay, so I would say like it starts with like in like the high rollers where I've had like the most success. It starts with like how's the person feeling that day, at what stage of the tournament are we in. Then it comes down to like when you're inside of a hand, you wind up in like a big river spot, and you then have to so now like in this big river spot, the person's representing a certain hand. Then you start to construct the hand from pre-flop to river and say, you know, it does the story check out of this person, the way that they usually play, or the way that, you know, do they actually have this hand? And it's, I guess it's continuously looking for things that don't make sense, that like kind of ring out. So it's like, you know, someone's trying to rep a hand on the river and you get to like the flop on it, and it just doesn't make sense to you that this hand that they're now trying to rep on the river that they actually had like on the flop or pre-flop or on the turn or so. So it's like deconstructing all the information that you have and like putting the puzzle back together and trying to solve, like, I guess, their way of thinking. So mine is all about trying to understand the way that the other person thinks. And I feel like I'm better equipped to wind up in rare situations than they are with the tools that I have. And I guess I welcome those new situations and am comfortable in them.
Yeah, you're more comfortable, I would say, from what I'm hearing, is like problem solving on the fly, basically.
Yeah, I've said exactly that before, for sure.
I mean, this is very important, and I've heard this before, and this is something that's currently a bit more overlooked, because solvers really make you focus on trying to play a good strategy from your perspective. But as you learned from this guy that you mentioned, he's only thinking about what his opponent has. And in order to know what your hand can do, we need to think about what our opponent has. And like current modern day thinking is way more focused on, oh, I should do this, I should do that. And that's very solver driven, where you're clearly way more focused on, okay, I'm trying to figure out what the hell this guy has. And if my hand can call, right? Sometimes people might fold a hand to say, oh, this hand is low up in my range, I don't need to call this hand. But like, yeah, but that's maybe the wrong questions. You want to ask yourself, can I call this hand based on what I think my opponent is up to?
And it's
and
like,
that
yeah,
way, if you think can, you might sometimes fold your range, or you might sometimes call your range, which, you know, is probably a more accurate way of going around things.
and then I think that I like think ahead too, whereas like, okay, the way I think in some spots is, let's say we wind up like on a flop, and we don't have anything, but this is like a board that versus our select opponent here, we can very safely bet like quarter pot, shove for pot on the river, and they're just gonna go call, fold. So whereas like someone else is thinking, okay, like I'm bluffing, so I want to bet big here and get him off it on the flop, I'm taking like the suicide, like not suicide, but I'm taking the very high risk approach of, okay, I'm sure that actually, because this guy's gonna fold on the river to my all-in shove, I actually want more and more chips. So actually, even though I'm bluffing, I'm actually value betting the flop and turn because I know I'm stealing it on the river.
Yeah, you're investing in your bluff, I like to call this. Investing
Yeah,
in your bluff. You're like, okay, let them call, because I'm gonna steal the pot later anyway.
exactly.
Yeah, this is, I think, also it's understanding how much, or your bet sizing, how that influences your range, and when kind of your desired job is complete. So you might fire out a very big bet on the earlier street and expect him to already fold most hands. And then to keep on firing is kind of useless, because you've already kind of pushed his range towards hands that are now only going to call you. So it's kind of understanding when, what job you're trying to accomplish and when the job is completed, so to speak.
Yeah.
Do you associate with that?
Yeah, definitely. And then like, because yeah, there's so much creativity that you can really do. So like another thing pops up to me. So we're playing like 100K tournament in Vegas. Opponent in the hand is David Einhorn, you know, super successful hedge fund guy, like plays poker for fun. Plays on the tighter side, I would say. So we wind up in this spot where we've got like 9-10 offsuit. The flop is like 10-4-4. He check calls the big blind. The turn comes like a 3. Like he check raises the turn. We call because it doesn't really make sense as anything. The river completes the flush on the river with a queen. So he checks, and in this spot, like almost everyone would check behind. I saw it as, okay, he tried some like strange bluff on the turn that he like check raised something that like has nothing. He doesn't have a flush here. You know, maybe he's got a random queen, but most likely he doesn't. So I just go for like the 10 to 15% bet on the river, only to induce a raise, knowing that we're actually never getting called and winning. Only inducing a raise. He wakes up with like a raise with his like ace 2 off or ace 5 off or something. And he's just like he stands up and he's just looking at the board like in disbelief. And another guy like comes up behind him and he tells him, he says, you know, good bluff, wrong customer.
Oh, I mean, good bluff. I mean, you would never make. Basically, your bet there is only designed to get raised. So I don't know how great the bluff is, but I completely agree with you here. Most people are like, well, oh, I check behind. I win quite often. He probably doesn't. He's going to call it anyway. So yeah, hand is over there. But the little and juicy on the river. I really like this play, man. It's a good
So
play.
it's like, yeah, it's like that creativity, you know, since everything's possibility, you just wind up in that spot at that exact time. And the correct play is only how you can extract the most value. You could say whatever for the best thing that you could do in every moment is either extract the most value or lose the minimum in like spots that you just can't win the pot. And you know, there can also be times where you just got lucky to get into that. Maybe it wasn't, but if you know, for me personally, if I was someone competing against myself and seeing, you know, these type of crafty plays, I wouldn't equate any type of luck with it.
No, especially like even on, how can I say? Let's say even it's a small sample. If you see a hand like this, it shows some sort of, you know, without boosting your confidence a bit too much, it shows some sort of brilliance. You know, like you have to really think on a other level to come up with a play like that. It's not within the standardized playbook.
Well, because yeah, it's like the thing of what is it? You master something in 10,000 hours, and when I like thought about it, I've spent about 100,000 hours like playing poker.
Oh, you probably reached mastery 10 times then, according to this rule.
Yeah, so
we saw a little piece of mastery right there.
Yeah, it's like it's normal. That's what's like supposed to happen, really. It's like you dedicate like your life and your craft to something, and I hope that you have some mastery in there. Not to say that you're perfect, because I'm very far from perfect, but willing to rewrite the drawing board.
Because like plays that are a bit more out of the box, they're usually also on a thin line, right, between brilliance and and like, what the fuck was that?
Well, that's the thing,
so
right?
you also mentioned like bring presents. I wrote down, you bring presents. How important is then bringing presents to, if you play this type of poker, right? Which I get you. You're a bit more intuitive. You follow your gut. Then if you're not present, and if your gut is wrong, you know, you're balancing a quite thin line there.
Yeah, and if you're not feeling good that day and your whole like thing is about like your instincts, and your instincts maybe are just off that day because like you're not thinking like in your most clear way. So then you just have to get back to the drawing board and be like, okay, well, I can't let anything that's going on outside of the table affect me at the poker table. And if it's going to, I can't play poker then.
That makes sense. So I've also heard you talk about the flow of the game. Which variables do exist in like within the word the flow of the game? What are we talking about? Because flow.
So it's
can
like
be a bit
stage of the tournament and like stack distribution of the table. So like, you know, when you're hitting these points of getting close to the money, close to the final table, there are sometimes, you know, like you were touching on, you can raise with any 2 cards without looking at your cards. But at the same time, if you're trying to do that same style and you've got strong players on your left, you know, good luck. Like you're going to wind up like in a tough one. So that's why like poker is like a bit, it's good to be humbled in poker, because, you know, just because you're playing tight in a certain like situation that you're in doesn't mean that you think that anyone's better than you. It just means that you think that that's the right strategy to come. So you can think that you're the best in the world, and you can also wind up at a table at a certain stage of a tournament and your mind is like, okay, I'm just gonna fold like everything. And then not to let it also affect, like, I don't know, what do you mean I'm the best? Like I have to, do something and make something happen. So, you just have to like sit back, take a breath, and it's gonna come to you.
Yeah, this is also kind of like it's a thin line again between forcing spots and trying to see spots that are not really there, or to really. And again, I agree with you, like presence, because those kind of spots you feel that are right, but sometimes you feel that you're kind of trying. You want the spot to be there, but you actually deep down inside it's not the one, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
still,
for
then you still
sure.
go for it
It's
because you're
always
trying
like
to
that
force
thin
it.
line, really, and that's why like you need the confidence.
And that's why I guess also why you spend so much time nowadays more on like being happy, being present, being in the moment, instead of forcing more hours on poker study, because it wouldn't really translate into more win rate for you.
Yeah.
What is something in your opinion that like current modern day GTO players fail to understand about the game of poker?
They see it like inside of a vacuum, that the situation is like, just there as it's presented to you and doesn't like change at all. And I mean, I couldn't disagree more with like the whole approach of GTO. I don't know if it's like just because the way that I think it doesn't relate to my own way of being at all, or that it's really something that's robbing everyone of their creativity. I'm sure that there are some people who are very robotic thinkers that their way of being is like kind of memorizing and playing like this certain style. But personally, I believe that it takes the fun and creativity out of the game, which you'll never be able to be your best without expressing some type of creativity and having fun. And I think yeah, that's why like poker is amazing, because it's like a perfect expression of your creativity. But then at the same time, it's so funny too. It's like life. There are so many ways to express your creativity in life, but all the things in life are telling you that you should be like this mold, fit in this box. You should do things this way. And the people there are, tons of people that go that way. I'm just in the way of thinking like, with actually infinite possibilities exist, have fun while you're doing something, be able to laugh at yourself. And yeah, so actually I hate it, to be honest, how the rhetoric nonstop is about how like, if you don't play GTO and poker, you can't win. Like, okay, well,
Maybe this is also like from the way people talked to you about GTO and how you got into touch with GTO, because I would say that I've studied a lot of GTO, but there's so much room to be creative. But it all comes down to you go sit with the solver, and if you go in there and you say, solver, tell me what I have to do, yes, it will rob you from all your creativity. But if you sit with the same solver and start to play around with it and ask it, hey, solver, what can I do in various situations if this changes, if this changes, if that changes, then suddenly you will see, oh, wow, if I play around with these variables, change this, then the solver is one of the most creative
yeah, well
poker
then
players
I wouldn't
on the
call
market,
that person, yeah, I wouldn't call that person like a solver player. I would say that they're using the tools that are available
to
to their
experiment.
advantage to enhance their game.
People forget that the solver, that the outputs that they're looking at, it's just a toy game. It's just a toy
Yeah.
game for the situation with the input that it's been given. It has nothing to do with reality.
Yeah, I think what it is too many people bunch together too many things that are similar but not the same, and then say that they are the same, and then see them as that same way instead of the approach that you can have with the solver. So I think that probably 99% of the people are in that bunch things together, do less work than they could in the approach that you're saying. I think the approach that you're saying is very similar to my approach in a different way. Mine is just doing it while playing nonstop, and yours is doing it while like tinkering with numbers nonstop. I think both of those can get to the same place, but
For sure.
like if you're textbooking it and bunching them together, I think that it can.
Yeah, so instead of, for example, what I would then recommend, let's say people would study how to play button versus big blind. Then they would study how to play hijack versus big blind. Then they would study MP versus big blind. in my opinion, you're wasting a lot of time, because if you would focus on button versus big blind and then just focus on, hey, I'm now in a tight range formation. What will change? Out of that, you get a concept. Oh, in tighter ranges, I will play like this. Or, I don't know, you were starting a spot at 40 BB. What changes if I play 20 BB? Out of that, you get certain concepts that you can apply to your game. Hey, in general, stack size will impact my strategy in a certain way, but you don't have to restudy the whole tree. And actually, the robbing of the creativity, we had actually a guest on in the previous podcast with Nikolai, and he touched on a blog of Stefan. You're probably not in touch with the current online street, but Stefan1122 is a very creative Russian poker player, considered one of the best. And he actually wrote in his blog that he didn't like poker. He saw it as a job. But when he started to see poker as an expression of himself and a place where he could express his creativity, that's when it all changed. And you had said exactly the same, so I had to remember of that previous podcast. For the people who want to check it out, go to the Nikolai podcast.
Yeah, I love to see it. Yeah, I love that thinking.
Yeah, he made a blog post. I put it in the description of the Nikolai podcast. I will send it over to you
Okay, cool.
after our podcast. It's really good poker player. What is something that you actually learned from new school players? Because you have played a lot with like the new school GTO players, and I'm sure they've put you in spots, and you pay attention to what other players do. That's a part of how you learn. What have you learned from like the new school era?
I think the new phase was like people squeezing like bigger, in out of position spots where like in the past there was a lot of like clicking and small raises where it's like really turned into like big raises in like these similar-ish type of spots. So it's like it's hard to say that definitively, because like throughout like all those phases, you see something that like Chidwick is doing and you like it and you incorporate it into like your game and you try to like pick those like pieces from everyone. So since it's like an always change, my approach is like always changing thought process. It's always taking what others believe to be what other smart people believe to be right or a good play, and analyzing it in your own like calculator and saying, okay, maybe actually I'm going to use this for this and this and this, or maybe you don't even realize and you just wind up in that spot and you've seen someone do that and you like it and you make like a similar play in that, and it's just like it's with you without you even realizing that it's with you.
I want to kind of take this moment to reflect, and you're currently at the top of the mountain, even though the mountain keeps on growing, right? This is just one of the mountains. What has been the most important lesson that poker has taught you?
Accept things as they are and not wish for something different.
Yeah, this is kind of the key to not being frustrated, because usually when we're just frustrated and angry, we haven't really come to terms yet with how current reality looks, right?
Because then you could say it even like in a more poker way of, you've got to accept the cards that you're getting dealt and not wish that you had different ones.
I mean, to be fair, how many people and how much brain power do you waste on like, oh, that's such a bad river. Oh, no, it's just a river.
It's
like
why
do we have to label it that this is not great? Oh, I'm in such a shit situation.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do get it. I mean, it happens. I'm sure it happens to you or am I the only human one here? Because sometimes if I'm in the wrong state of mind, it does still happen to me, right? Like, oh.
Of course, now everyone has like those thoughts, and like even thoughts that don't like resonate with you are gonna like pop up, and they're still gonna exist like in that space.
I wanted to start closing off this conversation. What would you like the main takeaway to be that people get from? I think we've talked over 3 hours, quite a long podcast, but you're a very wise guy, so we try to extract as much wisdom out of you as possible. What would you want the audience, their main takeaway of this conversation to be? So they're going to close off the conversation. They're going to be like, wow.
One of these things, I guess it bridges into the other. And one of these songs that I like, it says, if you think of something, it is. So I want to like, what that would mean to me is something more like, no dream is too big unless if you tell yourself that it's too big. But for great things to happen, you have to believe in yourself. If you don't have that belief in yourself, then you've already stacked the deck against you. So it's like, believe in yourself and just keep going. You know, don't let
Believe in
anyone
yourself
or
and keep going.
don't let anyone or anything stop you from what you believe to be true.
Wow.
But then also allow yourself to be humbled.
Adam, would you like to add anything to the takeaway?
Well, I have one unanswered question, so I want to really just dive in with that. So you mentioned earlier what you need to perform at your best, and you said number 1 was sleep. I was curious to know what's number 2 to 5 for Bryn to perform at his best. Let's say you're going into a super high roller final day. What are some of the things that are really important to make sure you show up as your best self?
Okay, so my biggest winning year was in that 2019 year, and it was a bit different than like all my other years. Like in those years, what I would say the most important things were eating good, clean food, rest, taking proper like supplementation to be prepared. Like in that moment, some of it was like brain pills, some of it was like like a green energy drink that I would bring. And bringing laughter and balance like in my life, I think are such underrated things. And especially those aren't really things that I had in my earlier years in my career, making like the storm tougher to navigate. But if you're going through intense times, if you can bring like fun and laughter like into your life, it'll make those much more manageable to get through.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. We'll wrap it up there, and we appreciate you spending the last 3 hours with us.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was a great combo. Loved having it with you guys.
All right, what a great conversation. That was wrapping up another great episode. Bryn Kenney, thank you very much for sharing all your wisdom. Adam, any main takeaways? I mean, there must be so many main takeaways, but, you know, not to repeat the whole podcast, just a couple ones.
Yeah, the main ones I want to dive into or just reflect on are dreaming big and having that big picture dream. I think anyone listening to Bryn could be inspired by his ability to think outside the box, but to set a goal that's scary, ambitious, but it's big thinking. Being the best poker player in the world, starting a poker site, anything he does, he allows himself to think big and have a big dream. Then we talked about like kind of having the belief and confidence in yourself to keep going, and some very challenging things for a lot of us to relate to, even myself, in terms of how he thinks about risk, being willing to put everything on the line for the belief in a better outcome or a belief in your kind of dream vision. And for him, he's got that so entwined that he always will sacrifice everything almost to get to where he wants to go. This can lead to big ups, big downs, but also it leads to him always being on the path and always backing himself to find answers. So this links to climbing the mountain. I had the analogy, I mentioned the hero's journey as we were going through it, but climbing the mountain and leveling up your character every step of the way. So he's trying to get to the best poker player in the world, and he's constantly learning lessons. And one of the things that allowed him to continually grow and level up was this mindset of accepting everything that happens and having this holistic view of everything is happening for a reason. Life has given me this challenge to learn from it, to grow. Therefore, I accept exactly what life has given me and I will move forward, which links into him being very present in the moment. He always thinks about being in the moment and trying to act from that lens, not getting caught up in the narrative, trying to give himself creative permission to be himself and express himself. But yeah, the ability to move on, accept, I thought was really powerful. You also mentioned surrendering to life, and we don't know how life's going to unfold. We can set a direction. Life might have other plans, and being okay with that. And then I think what we didn't really speak about as a concept, but I thought was a theme throughout the conversation, was resilience. He's very good at, he mentioned, digging himself out of a hole. And this is the ability to, when things get badly, continue to move forward. He mentioned holding on to the roller coaster when the roller coaster crashes a million into the hole. And he's definitely either had a lot of resilience, but most likely he's built resilience through adversity. He's went through more downs and swings than almost any of us will be able to relate to. Like the amount of times he's went negative a million is quite crazy to think about, but he's built resilience that's normal to him. He can handle it. And he says, when things get badly, I back myself to take that as armor, take that as fuel, and to get back to it and keep marching forward. So yeah, I think those are amazing life skills. I think, yeah, anyone listening would learn a lot from that. So anything for yourself, Rene, what the main topics you wrote down?
What really fascinated me is that he really takes in consideration a couple of things, actually. He takes in consideration the human aspect of poker, and he really zooms out and really sees it in the bigger picture. So he doesn't really look at the EV of the hand in a vacuum. He every time mentioned things that are like bigger picture EV wise, right? And then he talked a lot about maneuvering. So I remember he talked about, oh yeah, should you really defend the Jack 4 offsuit where it makes 0.1 BB? He also understood that, okay, what you see in the solver, in the charts and the EV, it's in a static model, where in the real world, we don't play in a static model. So what we have to do is figure out, well, okay, in which kind of scenarios is Jack 4 offsuit going to be plus 0.5 or minus 0.5? And that's, he mentioned like, oh, if you play against a guy who's winning all the tournaments, feeling very confident, he's probably going to play very good. He's going to follow up with a lot of aggression. So probably we should not be defending Jack 4 offsuit versus this specific opponent. So he's talking a lot about elasticity in your preflop ranges and maneuvering around the table, right? Playing more versus guys who are weaker, maybe low in confidence, and playing less versus the guy who's winning all the titles. It's probably not a great idea. He also talked about like creativity and giving yourself the permission to be creative. Also, Stefan talked about it. So if Stefan and both Bryn talk about it, both online and live geniuses, there's probably some truth in it. Let poker be an expression of your creativity. And how do you do that? You have to go in not with the question of what do I have to do here, but what can I do here? Because in can I do lays, I don't know how many possibilities, right? We can start playing around with the variables. Well, what happens if this changes? What happens if this changes? Then suddenly poker becomes very creative and becomes a lot of fun, okay? So focus on the impact certain variables have on strategies instead of just copying the strategies blindly. This is actually a topic we've touched on before, but also what Bryn really talked about, and I think opens up our mind with all the information that's actually available, right? I never thought about walking in a tournament room and seeing who's confident and based on that staying out of his way, right? But it's a piece of information that he has that he knows will determine the EV of his play, right? We can talk about tells, both physical tells, timing tells, etc. These are all pieces of information that we can pick up that gives us a more accurate picture about what his range really is. And that's when Bryn is really good at like trying to figure out if people are too strong, too weak, and then try to maneuver himself towards victory like he did in many, many tournaments. All right. Great conversation, great podcast. Wrapping it up. I want to know your main takeaways. Write them down below in the chat. GTO Wizard, our sponsor, will pick one of you lucky guys and you will win 1 month free GTO Wizard. Go over to gtowizard.com if you want to go check that out, or click in the link down below. I want to thank Adam for co-hosting this podcast with me, and I want to thank Rene for coming on. I want to remind you guys that it's the last opportunity to join the Mechanics of Poker 2.0 program. We are closing at the end of this weekend. If you want to have a chance to work with me and Adam, now is the time. We've put it together, the best promotion ever. You get a 25% off in the program, 3 bonuses, close to €3,000 of free value. And it's the last enrollment that we will do for the Mechanics of Poker 2.0. So this is your last chance to join the program before it closes permanently. Work with me and Adam, make more progress in your poker career in 2024. Wrapping it up, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.